and in-person meetings in council chambers. Public access is also available by telephone by using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda, and tonight's meeting will be broadcast on the city's YouTube channel online. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Leidy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hiramasa. Here. Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Here.
Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Roper.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Nowicki.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Manager Geyer, welcome back.
Thank you.
Are there any responses to resident inquiry?
I have 2 items to share with council this evening. The first is that the demonstration garden that was at Fox Run per council direction has been relocated to E.B. Raines Park. In that triangle area, we didn't need to increase the size in terms of the square footage. Like we had talked about, Resource Central committed to that location. The one piece you don't see, so the plants were transplanted, everything's in place irrigation-wise. The thing that you don't see currently is the small signs are out there right now, and so staff's working on larger signs to promote the program. The second piece that I sent council an email about on Sunday is that the banners have been removed, and one straggler banner was to be removed today, and I'm going to look at Sarah. Was that removed on Community Center Drive?
It's not today, it'll be super soon.
Okay. Then the other piece is that businesses have been notified and reimbursement checks will be received. They should receive those by November 1st. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Nope. Okay. Public invited to be heard. This is an opportunity for public comment on any item not set for public hearing. Statements are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Statements must be related to city business and limited to matters of community interest. City Clerk Small, is there anyone signed up to speak to council?
Yes, Madam Mayor, there are 2 individuals signed up. The first one is Tom Lampo.
Welcome. Please state your name and address and provide your comments to council.
Thank you. My name is Tom Lampo, 3951 Jackson Way. I'm here to lift up the community of Northglenn in prayer. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, in Jesus' name, we invite you here to Northglenn. You are the God of all creation, and nothing is greater than you. Jeremiah 32:17 declares your majesty, stating, "Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. Nothing can match your creativity, your care for your creation, and your desire for us all to call on your name. You are a jealous God, and you want the desires of our hearts to turn to you. Father, in these times where uncertainty is prevalent and we must make solid decisions, we need your word to come alive in our lives. Guide us as we make these decisions. Matthew 7:13 through 14, you tell us how we should approach the decisions we face. Your word states, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad and easy to travel is the path that leads the way to destruction and eternal loss. And there are many who enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow and difficult to travel the path that leads the way to life, and there are a few who find it." Guide and assist us in our life journey. We face many obstacles, and life is difficult to navigate without you. You are our God, and we are your people. In your precious name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys, and have a nice night.
Thank you.
The next person on the list is Diane Gussman.
Hello, please state your name and address and provide your comments to council.
It's Diane Gussman, 11735 Elate Court. And I was wanting to talk about, as I did last week, things that are going on at proposals for Huron Crossing, and a couple of the issues on this that I got from Heather, kind of some things that are laid out that they're looking at. I'm sure it's in her office. It's this one here. And so I'm concerned about the terminology of a bulb out into the street, because Heather and I were just talking about it. They may put one on both sides, but it impacts the side of my house and my parking. I'd like to not see bulbs put over there, and maybe just a speed bump in the road, because we have heavy commercial traffic over there since Amazon's out and UPS and FedEx and all those people are doing their thing now. And then the other one that I like art, but it seems to me when we do public art, it usually costs the community a lot of money. And I don't think that we need any art in the park. It's just a very small park. I just think it adds, I don't know, dogs peeing on it and birds. But the other one was around the park. Oh, I think that was about it. I just am opposed to having bulbs put on that side, because it's going to be right across from my house. It'll be right by the basketball court. It may, I don't know, the terminology is calm the traffic, but I think a speed bump would do just as well, and it wouldn't cost as much. I think we do need lighting in there. I don't know what the proposal is, if it's low ground sidewalk lighting or if it's like lamp post, which would really be nice, old-fashioned lamp post, 3 or 4. Sidewalk lighting on the ground would probably be a hindrance to snow plowing and other things that happen there. But anyway, those are my concerns on this one here. I know it's not this far yet, but anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Is there anyone in the audience who does not work for the city? No, it's a little quiet here tonight. All right, we're going to move into council communications. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was out of town and missed Youth Commission, but we were chugging along. And then I believe Mayor Pro Tem Luke Minhiramasma will report out on Ledge Committee. And that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Walker.
Thank you. Just want to thank Tom Lampo for his wonderful words of wisdom. And also want to say staff did a great job on the demonstration garden at Central Park. It looks wonderful. It's probably the best looking grass in the city. So thank you for the expedited work on that.
Councilmember Nowicki.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. The Northglenn Senior Organization, there's 2 events coming up. The Veterans Day celebration on November 11th at 11 a.m. The American Legion Post 22 will be there to post colors, provide a gun salute and taps. Speakers include the mayor, Councilmember Kondo, Doug Goodfeathers, and others. Guests will then be invited for a free spaghetti lunch at the Senior Center. And Girl Scout Troop 65790 will be helping to serve food along with patriotic songs being sung by the Colorado Chord Company. Number 2, the Curtain Call Tea-In Tour is on November 15th at 1:30 p.m. Seniors are invited to get a peek behind the curtain of the Parsons Theater while Northglenn's Youth Theater production of Sister Act is coming together. It's only $10. Start with tea and a presentation by the artistic producer to find out exactly how shows like this come together, and then you can get a private tour to the backstage areas to see the creative process in action. That is all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Jaramillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On October 24th, I attended the NADA North Area Transportation Forum meeting. And we had a meeting with RTD, and the CEO of RTD was there, Deborah Johnson. And I asked the questions of why there's no restrooms at Wagon Road Park and Ride at the end line on all stops. And I feel like she spoke about primary needs and basic necessities for her customers, but I feel like having restrooms is a basic need and necessity. And I just didn't really reach a satisfactory answer of why there are no restrooms and what the solution could be. So I just think that that's something that I'll continue to bring up at these meetings with NADA, since we meet with RTD once a month. And that was just really it was disappointing that it still hasn't been, and nothing's been done for years. Also, just today I met with a constituent regarding how there's no raised crosswalks and crossing beacons along the Greenway Trail. There's like on 112th Place, 115th Avenue, Phillips, and Truda, and then I don't believe there is one on 119th or on Graves Street or Drive. So that was something that I wanted to bring up too, that it wasn't consistent. And I think we need to be consistent when we have that Greenway Trail, that the students or pedestrians or bicyclists are safe at all times crossing there. So that's something I wanted to bring up too, and it's also dealing with speeding, so I feel like that'll help address that concern as well. And I also wanted to clarify for the last meeting, we had I know someone online mentioned that art shouldn't be coming out of the general fund. It's coming out of the Northglenn Arts and Humanities Foundation general fund and not the city's general fund. So that includes the traffic boxes that we have that are going to be wrapped soon with art, and also the sculptures that was also addressed today. It's from the Northglenn Arts and Humanities Foundation general fund and not the city's. So I just wanted to make sure we clarify that, and that it becomes a gift and an asset to the city, the art, once that's passed on through resolution. So I just wanted to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I was out of town spending some quality time with my family in Illinois. It included a wedding and a birthday party, so I really enjoyed that. And so I don't really have a whole lot to report, except I did want to just kind of remind everybody that we do have an election coming up in about a week. And no matter the results of that, I'm urging people to keep calm and just remember Northglenn is a safe place for everyone, and we're going to continue working on our strategic plan to guarantee that everyone feels that way in our community. So, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Everything I have to report out on happened this morning. So first of all, Rocky Flats Stewardship Council had their very last meeting ever. As I've briefed previously, the number of municipalities that are staying in this consortium is below the minimum threshold required to keep the council running. So we approved a budget that will take us through Q1 of 2025 that will allow for the unwinding of the organization, and any remaining funds that were contributed by the cities will be divvied up by the remaining number of municipalities, I believe it's 10, and returned to us. Just a note for the public, I mean, this is a stewardship council that's been around for quite a while. I think it's like since 2005. So it's some 20 plus year legacy of being a forum for the public to address their concerns. And obviously with this going away, the public will now have to contact other forums, if you will, to express their concerns. And of course, we as a municipality are that lightning rod. And my expectation, though, is that I don't think there really is a lot of concern at this time. But certainly the relationship with Department of Energy, Legacy Management, with the APA, and with the city at the staff level will go on. That will continue. We'll continue to receive reports so that we may remain apprised as to the condition of that site. And we are able to receive alertment in case there's something that we need to do proactively in an untoward sort of event. Not that I'm expecting one. And then, second of all, along with Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Roper, myself, City Manager Geyer, and Jessica Hulse, we toured the Rose Andom Center, which is, I believe they said that it's Denver Metro's first family justice center. And I'm going to stop there. I'll allow other people to talk about it. But the one takeaway that I got out of this center, which has been around, I think, since 2018, is that the city and county of Denver currently has about 4,000 DV incidences in a given year. And that the Denver Police Department, they actually have their DV response team embedded at that center. There's 11 sergeants and 2 other non-sworn people there. But you do the math, 4,000 distributed among 13 people, that's a lot. So to me, my takeaway is A, having a family justice center, there's a huge unmet need for it. And B, as we're trying to build this airplane, as we're flying it here in Judicial District 17, it seems to me that we really do need to nail down what the principles are and what are the norms for how really a large number of disparate organizations with different cultures and different lenses are able to come together respectfully and be able to hold hands and play well in the sandbox. Unfortunately, I think we're struggling with that right now. I'm not going to get into details, but that's something that I think is really critical, and I hope that we'll be able to focus on that going forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Roper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I had a few things over the past few weeks. I had the opportunity to attend Safe Street Halloween, which was exciting and fun. This was the 25th annual Safe Street. Again, this is a collaboration between the Northglenn Police Department, Northglenn High School, and our local community businesses. We are so thankful for this collaboration as it provided this safe and really amazing and engaging event for our community. I think we had about 3,000 people come through, or more than 3,000 people, and it was just a really great opportunity to see all the community out, to see the kids out, see the costumes. It was really a great event. I also was invited to attend the DICE board meeting this week, actually last week, and just hear about the amazing things that are happening there and just all of the initiatives that they are taking on throughout the city, and just coming alongside events like Noel Northglenn, really working with the with their sensory backpacks, and just they are doing so many incredible things here in our city. Also, they are going to be presenting to council in the next few weeks, and so I'm excited for that. And then also with my fellow council members and City Manager Geyer, we attended the Rose Andom Center this morning. And again, not to repeat everything that Councilmember Kondo said, but one thing that really stood out to me was the many different pieces of the puzzle that were housed under one roof, and then with the main objective of serving the community and serving a community that's desperately in need, and just the way that they made it so user-friendly, so safe, so trauma-informed, that really it was a place where people could go and seek out help in a time of need. So, and that is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was happy and fortunate to attend the APWA, which is Public Works Awards celebration on the 22nd, and also proud to sit at a table of engineers that worked on the 120th Roadway Improvement Project, which is what we won the award for. So congratulations to our Public Works team, great job. It was truly an honor to be there and, be a part of that as well as see all the wonderful projects that are happening in other municipalities. That's also kind of fun to see what everybody else is doing and what they're winning awards for as well. I attended, I don't know when this was because I didn't write the date, feels like there's quite a few things, the ADCOG quarterly dinner update. Federal Heights hosted this time, and the guest speaker was Dr. Kelly Weinbach from the department, did I say her name right? From the Department of Health. So she did an update, just kind of giving an overview on what the Department of Health is working on and how it affects, obviously, our municipalities. Currently, the focus is on mental health, which I think is very important, and really revolving around reducing that stigma. So that's really great news. I think that's definitely the way to help folks moving into the future, is reducing stigma and knowing that you can get help if you need it openly. I attended the AC Rep Executive Council meeting in place for Dr. Goff, who is out, so I'm the alternate. And they really were focusing on restructuring, looking at creating a board of directors, which doesn't currently exist, to kind of overview and oversee all the programs and all of the good work that AC Rep does. So that will take some work, as well as maybe reducing some other areas that are superfluous, or adding a lot of work that doesn't need to happen. And for those that don't know, AC Rep serves as our area's Chamber of Commerce, and so that was another piece of advice and input that they were receiving from those of us that were there, is that a lot of folks don't know that. Once it merged, Adams County Economic Development Council Incorporated merged with Metro Denver North, and kind of took over that role. A lot of businesses, local businesses, don't know that. So they're going to focus kind of on rebranding and pushing that out, which I think will be really wonderful as well. And then, yes, along with fellow council members and City Manager Geyer and Jessica, attended the Rose Andom tour, and everything that was said was well said. It was truly, I think, important for us to see as council members and staff, to see how a family justice center can operate, and all the work and money that it takes to make it operate. But yeah, it was incredible to see just how many community partners are there, and the collaborative work with Denver Police Department too, that I didn't know about, as Councilmember Kondo reported out on that, was pretty eye-opening. 4,000 DV cases a year. One is too many, so an FJC is important in the 17th. We absolutely need it, and hope to continue to support the work there. Thanks to Jessica for helping organize that tour as well. And then the last thing, and probably the most important, is we had our legislative committee today. There's still a lot of moving pieces. The session doesn't actually start until January 8th, but everybody would probably like to know that there is no money. So that was one of the first things we talked about. There is no money. In fact, there's a deficit to the tune of $1.3 billion. So this should be an interesting legislative session as bills move through and aren't approved based on availability of funding or not. Joint Budget Committee, I believe, has their first hearing on November 1st. I think I got that right. So things are not quite moving yet, but they're about to. No surprise here that some of the issues that we will see, of course, are housing, construction defects, and issues around law enforcement. But one thing that I learned today, and all of us learned, that I've never heard of, is something called YIGBY, which is, we've heard of NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. So YIGBY is yes in God's backyard. And apparently the governor's office is interested in hearing more about this, but this is to allow churches to build affordable housing in their backyards, basically on their property. Maybe manufactured homes, no idea. There's still a lot of questions around this. The issues that we could see is if it surpasses local government's ability to determine where housing can go in a church's backyard, but very interesting nonetheless, and I learned a new term, YIGBY. YIGBYism, now you know. Construction defects is also a hot topic that we'll see, and this time it's coming from the realtors. So, of course, the issue with that is there's not an insurance market for construction defects, and if that is mandated for insurance companies to sell construction defects insurance, then that is could potentially push insurance business out of Colorado. So there's always a caveat to fixing one thing and doing something else. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. And then I do have a couple of things that I need to get council consensus on for our legislative committee. We are looking at December 18th, and I would love feedback on this for the city manager to move forward for our legislative dinner. That is a Wednesday, the week before the craziness of the holidays. But if we can't do it that day, then potentially we're looking at having to push that out into January. So a thumbs up if you take a second to look at your calendars. We know there's a Dr. Cog meeting, but okay, great. So far? Ish.
I mean, I have things, but.
Well, you need to be there, so.
Yeah. We'll talk later.
Okay, so potentially yes, maybe, January?
I'll look at January dates.
Okay, yes, because if our mayor can't be there, then we're gonna need to look at.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We can look at January dates.
Okay, then that's why we're bringing it up now.
Okay.
To make sure everyone can be there. And then the second date is for our legislative breakfast, our spring breakfast with legislators at the Capitol. And that, the date we're looking at is March 21st. That's a Friday. That would be between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. And we looked at Adams County District 12 spring break to make sure our educators could be there. It's not spring break. Not Adams 12. Well, I thought.
That is my spring break.
It is your spring break?
It is.
Of course.
Apologies, I didn't look at Jeffco schools. I looked at Adams.
She just said that. I was like, oops.
We can go back to the drawing board on that. We have plenty of time if council wants me to look at another date.
Or you could pencil that one in, and we can talk. I don't have a fabulous vacation plan, so it might work out well.
Okay, so
we'll pencil it in.
Just toss that back to you, and thank you. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Comno, everything I'm going to share, none of it happened this morning. So here we go. And my comments today are actually brought to you by cold and flu season.
Oh, yeah.
Really just a reminder, some of us are kind of recovering up here, and just local pharmacies and doctor's offices all have the flu shot available. But go back to washing your hands really good and stocking up on Kleenex, I think, is important. A couple of things. I did also attend AdCog, and Mayor Pro Tem shared the highlights, but one of my favorite things about the Adams County Council of Governments quarterly dinners is the opportunity to hear from other cities. They all share all of their celebrations and highlights, and District Attorney Brian Mason was there, and he gave us some updates as well. So it was great. The highlight of my week last week was an annual thing that I get to do with the Metro Mayor's Caucus, and it's a Habitat for Humanity build, and it's my favorite day. It's so much fun. It did, however, spark a nudge or a request for council. I know we haven't made any decisions, but we are talking about the Civic campus tonight, and I would like us to at least consider asking the question about whether or not a habitat build would be appropriate for this site. It's an incredible opportunity for home ownership. It may not be a possibility, but it's definitely on my mind. And if you haven't had the opportunity and you would like to, coordinating maybe a council build day might be fun as well. It's a good time, and it's a lovely organization. So, and then I just want to do a plug for my coffee with the mayor at 9:30 on Saturday. We will be in our new city hall in the community rooms. It's a pretty open forum. I would like residents to come and literally just talk. Tell me what's on your mind. Tell me what you need. Talk about celebrations too. And we'll just have a nice, relaxing time together on Saturday morning. Okay, City Manager Geyer, do you have any updates?
I do have several updates, so bear with me. The first is Commander Rice is back on Wednesday, and so I will email council information, specific data regarding proactive enforcement that the police department did the Thursday, the 17th through the weekend of the 20th for expired plates in Northglenn. So they did significant enforcement on expired plates and towed vehicles that were 6 months expired or more. I just don't want to send you those stats or share them currently because I think there's probably been some updates based on continued enforcement. So this is a concern that has come through the CRM, and staff is working to reconcile and close out certain requests that have come in, but I wanted to let council know that I authorized and asked Chief May to have officers work overtime in the evening hours to ensure that contact with vehicles could be made based on the fact that we are seeing some of the CRM requests come through where the vehicles could not be located during the daytime hours. So that enforcement activity has taken place. Police will continue to work with neighborhood services and figure out an approach moving forward in terms of continued enforcement for compliance with state law on that front. The other piece is just a couple quick clarifications. Councilmember Kondo mentioned Denver PD's presence at the Rose Andom Center. That's 2 sergeants and 11 detectives, which I just wanted to clarify that tied to that 4,000 number that was mentioned by a couple council members in terms of the number of DV cases that they see on an annual basis. And then Amanda asked me to clarify that the traffic signal cabinet wraps are not significantly funded by NAHF. They're funded through ADCO discretionary dollars and then ADCO grant dollars, with a small portion coming from the NAHF, no general fund dollars though. So just wanted to, that's a bit different than the public art program that Councilmember Jaramillo was sharing about. So 3 other updates. The holiday season is upon us. So the Irish Christmas in America performance is scheduled for December 1st at 2 p.m. It's sold out, but they've worked with the performers to add a second show at 6 p.m. So if you don't have tickets, jump online and get your tickets to that show. And I believe Motones and Jersey Boys is back this year. Hopefully those shows aren't sold out because I don't have my tickets yet. With shorter daylight hours and colder temperatures, restroom facilities within parks will be locked between 3 and 3:30 p.m. each day. And with the colder temperatures and fewer park visitors in the evening hours at EB Rain Parks, incidents of vandalism have significantly increased in the recent weeks despite enhanced patrols by park staff and rangers. Some restroom components in this park are no longer serviceable and replacement parts may be unavailable for damaged items. So design is nearing completion for a 2025 project to retrofit the park restrooms with new upgraded fixtures, including toilets, sinks, changing stations, doors, and locks. The portable restroom facilities, also known as sandalets, will remain open and locked for park patrons. So if any of our public have noticed that there's been some impacts, that's why, and staff will continue to work on the larger capital project that's underway. The last item to share with council is that the irrigation season is coming to a close and winterization of all systems is underway. A few areas will continue to receive supplemental watering due to the extended warm weather, ongoing sports field use, and need to establish newly planted materials and sod. So if you get any questions from residents about why is the city watering, there'd be a specific purpose with that, and we know that we're watering. It's not a mistake in terms of timing of systems. So drinking fountains have been winterized, and facility heating systems are being tested and prepared to handle impending temperature fluctuations, which I think I've seen a few freeze alerts come through my phone. So just wanted to share those for awareness, and that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. City Clerk Small. Okay. City Attorney Hoffman.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, nor do I.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and the consent agenda passes unanimously.
Thank you. Ordinances on first reading, CB 2024. Will the clerk please read the title?
A bill for an ordinance adding section 11-7-7 to Article 7 of Chapter 11 of the Northglenn Municipal Code regarding housing occupancy limits.
Move for approval.
All right, we will welcome our Director of Planning and Development, Brooks Svoboda, to provide a summary of this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be very brief here. This is a first reading on CB 2024 regarding legislation that was passed in this year's legislature, House Bill 24-1007, regarding the definitions of limiting occupancy or prohibiting municipalities from limiting occupancy based on familiar relationships. This bill is essentially taking the position that the city is rejecting what the bill is asserting as a statewide concern, and that we are maintaining our local control over this land use policy issue.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Nope. Thank you. Appreciate it. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CB 2024 on first reading passes unanimously.
Great. We have quite a few resolutions tonight. We'll start with CR 158. Will the clerk please read the title?
A resolution accepting the sculpture known as Metamorphosis and approving the placement of the sculpture.
Move for approval.
Seconded.
All right, our Northglenn Arts and Humanities Director, Michael Stricker, is here to provide a summary. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Leidy and City Council. The resolution before you tonight would allow for the acceptance and placement of the sculpture Metamorphosis by Brighton resident Vanny Channel. This piece was the 2023-2024 Art on Parade People's Choice winner. As has been done for the past 24 years, the NHF has secured funding for the purchase of the sculpture and will be gifting it to the city. Staff and the NHF recommend that it be placed at the Pollinator Garden at Fox Run Open Space. We're excited to continue to grow our sculpture collection through donations such as this, and are seeking council support in moving forward. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions, comments? Councilmember Jaramillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Michael. I just wanted to clarify, I sent an email out earlier to everybody, and I didn't realize that this location was different than the location where we removed the pollinator garden. So I was under the impression it was in that same location. So that was a miscommunication. I had to look at the at the detailed map that we have here, attachment 2. So now I realize that it's not in that location. I thought it was like, okay, we removed the pollinator's garden and we're going to put a pollinator sculpture there. It's like, okay, so I received the clarification, and I'm in support if council is in support of this location. Thank you.
That makes sense. Any other questions or comments? No. Thank you for being here. Oh, I think you're up next anyway, but please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 158 passes unanimously.
CR 159, will the clerk please read the title?
A resolution approving the placement of the sculpture known as Potato Man.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right. Michael Stricker is back. Tell us
Okay.
about this one.
The resolution before you tonight would allow for the placement of the sculpture Potato Man by Susan Gessler. This piece was the 2004-2005 Art on Parade People's Choice winner. The sculpture was purchased by the NHF and gifted to the city in 2005. Staff in the NHF recommend that it be placed outside of the Senior Center in the southeast corner near the patio. There's a perfect spot there. There is also strong support from the Northglenn Senior Organization as well. I'd be glad to take any questions from you now.
Questions, comments? I see a lot of smiles. I know we had some discussion about Potato Man earlier, and looking at the image, I think that is the perfect spot. That's really great. Any other comments? No? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 159 passes unanimously.
CR 160, will the clerk please read the title?
A resolution adopting the City of Northglenn 2025 pay plan and 2025 personnel summary.
All right, our Director of Human Resources and Chief Diversity Officer, Tamara Dixon, is here to provide a summary.
Good evening, Mayor Leidy.
Hi.
I am here.
The 2025 pay plan was developed by staff along with support of Graves Consulting, who is our consultant that we have used for the past 3 years, I believe.
Director Dixon, we lost audio for you. Did you happen to lean on the button? No?
How's that?
Perfect.
My apologies.
That's okay. We just want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me start over. The 2025 pay plan was developed by staff along with our compensation consultant, Graves Consulting, who we have used for the past 3 years. Principal Lori Graves was here in August to present that plan to council. And while no new positions were added to the plan or the personnel summary, we are asking approval to add back the position of engineering manager. That position was included in the 2023 pay plan, just not last year. So the Director of Public Works would like to reclassify a vacant senior engineer to that engineering manager, and that's really to ensure optimal project management and effective use of resources in the department. The total budget impact in 2025 to reclassify the vacant senior engineer to an engineering manager would be approximately $35,000, and that is the difference in the projected salary and benefits for the engineering manager versus the salary and benefits of the incumbent senior engineer who we lost about a month ago. The 2025 pay plan is included in the 2025 operating budget, which will be coming before council this evening for adoption. Staff recommends approval of CR 160, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just curious, as it was last year, are we still having challenges trying to recruit engineers, or can you just kind of talk to what the market is looking like this year around?
So, Councilman Kondo, thank you for the question. I would actually have to answer that question once we attempt to recruit another engineer. We just lost 2 of them, and so we've not yet seen any significant issues, but I would be happy to come back with that information if we do. Here's hoping that we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 160 passes unanimously.
Thank you. CR 161. Will the clerk please read the title?
A resolution establishing the mill levy of the City of Northglenn, Colorado for the fiscal year 2024, collectible in 2025 for municipal purposes.
Move for approval.
Second.
Deputy City Manager and Director of Finance, a man of many hats, Jason Loveland, is here to provide a summary.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. So annually, we adopt a mill levy this year for 2024. The request is for the same as it has been for about 40 years running, 11.597 mills, which is roughly about 10% of the total mills that Northglenn residents have on their tax bill. So this year, the total preliminary assessed valuation from the counties of Adams and Weld was just over $544 million. You can see at the table below kind of the fluctuations from year to year that happen. Odd years are the assessment years, which is why you see kind of increases. So in 2024, there's a modest increase, not an assessment year, but there is some fluctuation there of just 1.4%. The mill levy is broken up into two parts. The first 7.597 mills is used to support general operating activities, with the 4 mills in addition are restricted for the purpose of major road and street reconstruction projects. So this is a very vital resolution before you tonight that helps us serve our residents from an operating side and from an infrastructure side. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and staff recommends approval of this resolution.
Questions, comments? Nope, fantastic. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 161 passes unanimously.
CR 162, will the clerk please read the title?
A resolution adopting the 2025 budget of the City of Northglenn, Colorado, and appropriating the sums set forth therein.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, our Deputy City Manager, Jason Loveland, will provide a summary of this item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So we're at the end of the budget process. This is a culmination of a lot of work from a staff perspective and council perspective that starts many, many months ago. Staff, kind of got deep into it starting in May. Council's been involved throughout various conversations throughout the year. The public has a major impact and influence of what goes into this budget. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's participated and committed such time and resources to the effort. As I mentioned, the last few months, there's been several meetings regarding this, August, September, and October. There was a public hearing held on October 14th where we had a little bit of public participation to speak about this budget. But all in all, I'm not going to go over through numbers. I think that we've seen the numbers over and over again, or maybe it's just me. But overall, the budget being proposed for consideration this evening is $85,881,956. That is across all of our funds. And this is things that are going to support operations, our capital construction, and our long-term debt services. So as we know, this is a living, breathing document. There will be modifications brought forward in the spring of 2025. But for where we are today, this is the proposed budget that you all have been working diligently on, and staff recommends approval.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. So my question is, and I apologize, I probably should have sent this at a time, but I just wanted to clarify that under the capital project of the Civic Center site development, one of the things is listed as a parking lot. We haven't decided what kind of parking lot or anything like that, have we?
So that bigger conversation hasn't been fully vetted. However, there is a portion of, once the old city hall is torn down, a portion of that will be made into a parking lot to serve this new building.
Okay, all right, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Excellent, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 162 passes with 1 no vote cast by Councilmember Walker.
Okay, moving to CR 163. Will the clerk please read the title?
A resolution approving change order number 2 to the agreement between the City of Northglenn and American West Construction LLC for emergency pipeline repairs.
Move for approval.
Second.
Director of Public Works, Sarah Borgers, will provide a summary. Welcome.
Mayor and City Council, it's good to see you tonight. I'm here tonight for Resolution CR 163, which will amend our contract with American West. We have this contract with American West to address emergency utilities issues that we run across throughout the year. Unfortunately, we've had a few this year. The latest that this specific change order is for a sanitary sewer collapse that happened at Melody and Pinion Drive. So that work was $156,875. We're asking for a change order of $160,000. What this does, it allows us close to $60,000 to remain in that contract in case we do have any other emergencies through the end of the year. We're able to manage that. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not that I meant to ambush you with this question, but the thought just occurred to me just now. But do we do any trend analysis to kind of figure out what our emergent repair costs look like, say, over the last 5 years, so that, you know, we can kind of get a sense of maybe how our aging infrastructure is starting to fail? Maybe it gives us some insight as to what we might have to spend in the near future and the next years or next few years?
I think that's a really smart question. That's something that we have talked about internally is looking at kind of our short and long-term goals for the collection and distribution system. There are portions of our system that are aging, and I think that's an important question that we need to answer over the next year or two. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Please open the vote.
The vote just disappeared. Let me.
Don't say that. Yeah.
What? Oh, don't say.
1 second. Okay, the vote is open.
Perfect. Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 163 passes unanimously.
CR 167. Will the clerk please read the title?
A resolution certifying delinquent nuisance abatement charges to the Adams County Treasurer for collection pursuant to CRS Section 31-20-105.
Move to approve. Oh, second.
City Clerk Joanna Small will provide a summary of this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If it's okay with Council, I'll give a summary that will touch on both CR 167 and 168, but happy to answer questions separately about the two resolutions. So these resolutions will allow the city to certify delinquent accounts due for nuisance abatement charges and also for delinquent water and sewer utility bills to the Adams County Treasurer to be collected as special assessments as part of, it's similar to the process where residents have their property taxes collected by the county. In this case, a resident would see the charges as a special assessment on their property tax bill. The county collects the amounts due, and then they remit the amount that's due to the city of Northglenn less their fee. So the city clerk's office places liens on properties for code violations where the city sends a contractor or staff out to abate the property, or for delinquent water and sewer accounts. Those liens secure the amounts that are due to the city. Even with the certification process, those liens will remain in place to secure those amounts due until full payment has been received. So under Colorado state law and then the city's adopted ordinances, we have available the process to certify these amounts to the Adams County Treasurer. The certification process ensures that the city can collect these delinquent amounts due in a more timely manner. So they will be collected as part of the property tax accounts in 2025 and remitted to the city on a monthly basis as payments are received. If the certification process does not occur, the amounts will still be due to the city, the liens will still remain in place. It will just take longer for the city to receive the payments. In that case, we rely on the property owners proactively paying the amounts due, or when the property is sold through that title process, the title company will they should clear any liens on the account, so the payments are made at that time. So if the resolutions are approved tonight, the collection process could recover a total of $66,885.13 in amounts due to the city. You will notice that the memos were revised today to fix that amount because we added one utility account to CR 168. That was for a utility account that was missed in the initial review. So I am happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you for answering my email question, because I was just trying to understand the flow of monies. But it does prompt me to think about one other question, and that is, okay, so if a resident is in arrears on paying their water or sewer bill, and obviously now we're going to put it on the county to collect, how does the resident know that collection has been sent to county?
Yeah, so every property owner on the list that were submitted as part of the packet were issued a notice. They received a letter letting them know that there are amounts due and that they have a period of time in which to submit that amount so that they don't incur any other penalties. And I should clarify, for the water and sewer accounts, it is not every utility customer who may be delinquent on their utility bill. There are two criteria that utility billing looks at, and that is the amount of time past due and then the amount that is owed. So these are only properties that meet certain criteria. There are a lot more accounts that would be delinquent just on a normal basis. So for the folks that are on these lists, they received a notice from our office, and then we will work with them. They still have time to make that payment. If we receive any payments before the deadline to certify the final list of amounts to the county, then they will either be removed or the amount will be reduced to the current amount owed at that time.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for my remark about being hacked. We weren't.
Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the question I have is this a new process or is this something that we renew every year?
It's not. Typically, the process happens every year. I would say about, maybe 15 years ago, the city took the position that this is a collection tool that's available to the city, and we should take advantage of it every year in order to collect these amounts due quicker. However, during COVID, we decided not to certify the amounts due at that time, just to not put an additional hardship on residents who were going through foreclosures and who had lost jobs, lost wages. So this is the first year since COVID that we are taking advantage of the certification process.
Thank you for that clarification.
I don't see any further questions. Thank you so much. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 167 passes unanimously.
CR 168, will the clerk please read the title?
A resolution certifying delinquent water and sewer charges to the Adams County Treasurer for collection pursuant to CRS Section 31-20-105.
Move for approval.
Second.
City Clerk Small, do you want to add anything? I know you covered it in your last presentation.
Yeah, for the water and sewer charges, we are proposing to certify a total of 11 accounts to the county, and I'm happy to answer questions about those accounts.
I don't see any questions. Thank you so much. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. I will close that vote, and CR 168 passes unanimously.
Thank you. We have 2 discussion items tonight. The first one is the Northglenn Playbook update. Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, Amanda Peterson, is here to discuss this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us tonight. I also have with me here tonight Jay Rankins from MIG, and we'll be turning the presentation over to him after a few introductory slides. So the purpose tonight is to provide you with an update on our Playbook process, which is our Parks, Recreation, and Culture long-range plan, including an overview of the process itself, as well as the draft document and discussion of next steps. A little bit of background. You've seen us here before you on this topic several times now. We initially contracted with MIG in September of 2022. We provided you with a more comprehensive update on the project in July of 2023. And throughout the process, we've had significant contact with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, including updates in July of 2023, December of 2023, and July of 2024, and September of 2024. Along with other touch points along the way. And this document is really intended to be a high-level document that serves as a guide to us for the next 10 to 15 years. I wanted to talk a little bit because during your strategic planning process, there were many of your Padlet ideas, other concepts that came up that are addressed in this plan. So we just wanted to confirm that there's alignment between, and hopefully you're able to see that. We're looking for feedback on that as we go through the plan tonight. But just alignment with the new strategic plan that you're in the process of developing and the goals that have come up during that process. So with that, I would love to turn it over to Jay Rankins from MIG. He's, as I said, going to talk through the process as well as plan recommendations. And then as we wrap up that section, we're looking for feedback from you, and then we will cover what our next steps are. So Jay, it is all yours.
Great.
I won't go too far, though.
Thank you, Amanda.
Welcome back.
Hi, Mayor Leidy. Hello, Council. Pleased to be here this evening. Yeah, we've had a really good time working on this plan. As you probably all know, I think it's one of the areas, particularly when we throw in Parks, Recreation, Arts, and Culture, that most, if not all, residents are a fan of. And so through this process, I'll highlight some of the things that we did as far as engagement, but this is really a plan sort of informed by, driven by the community input. Obviously, there's data collection and things that we worked on with staff in terms of the current conditions of many of the facilities and parks. But ultimately, this is a community-driven plan, and I'll try to highlight that throughout the presentation. We want to give you a little overview of the plan itself, just how it's organized for the most part. It's pretty meaty, so you all have a copy of that, so we won't go through all the detail. And then highlight a few implementation components, implementation plan, and then the requested action at the end. So the planning process, we broke that into 5 phases. Not too atypical for a planning process in general. Visioning, existing conditions, the needs and opportunities, which we do in most planning processes, but I would say it's pretty explicitly defined in a Parks and Recreation master plan. And so I'll get to a few components of that. Implementation action plan, and then the document development being the last phase. So the community input, you know, we started pretty early. As Amanda pointed out, the contract started in kind of fall of 22. So we were sort of establishing that existing conditions, looking at the baseline data, making that, or putting that in a presentable form. So it was really in February where we kicked things off in full gear as far as the engagement, where we had the statistically valid survey. If you recall, there was also that same survey instrument was then put online as an online questionnaire as well to just solicit additional input. We had neighborhood groups and elected official interviews. There was a series of focus groups that we conducted with certain recreational kind of affinity groups, as well as just trying to get a cross sample of the community, different geographies, different ages, different interests, that sort of thing. And then the staff actually conducted several pop-up events where we supplied some of the materials. I guess I attended a couple of those too. One of the theater, which was really great. Saw a theater production as a result. And then we did the community-wide prioritization survey, which we had a lot of results for as well, which I'll highlight a couple. And then this past summer, when we actually had a public review draft of the plan, we've made those available hard copies at several of the community facilities, including the rec center. And then it was available online as well. So we solicited input in a variety of ways on that draft plan. So some highlights. This is probably the best one right here, although I'm going to highlight a few of the survey results as well. But as far as the priorities, completing the trail network was a big one. I think we talked about that early in the process, that trails are one of the most popular recreational amenities across the country, but in particular, I'd say in Colorado and in the Front Range. So not too surprising to see that, but people wanting to see some of those sort of gaps in the network filled. Reinvesting in and repairing the replacement of the aging facilities, such as playgrounds, sports facilities, and restrooms. You'll see that in a couple of the other summary slides, that being a really high priority, kind of taking care of what we have. And not that there shouldn't be any new investment, but making sure that that is remains a priority moving forward. The improvements to the existing amenities, kind of on that same track. Protecting or enhancing natural areas and open space. So I think there's the face of Northglenn isn't changing dramatically, of course, being a built-out community, but I think there is still that little bit of concern, probably more of a reaction to kind of metro-wide development and the loss of open space, but wanting to maintain that. Safety and security of parks, you heard a little bit about that earlier this evening already. Activities in the parks, more recreation programming variety. Part of that was the communication and education of all the great things that are being offered. So we have some recommendations around that. So yes, increasing the programming strategically, but more so kind of getting the word out because there is so much for so many different folks. Frequency and variety of events, and then recreation center operational improvements. So that budgeting exercise, kind of that prioritization through the funding piece, not too surprisingly, it sort of matched what we heard earlier in the process in the focus groups and in the survey and the questionnaire. Completing the trail network came out as the second highest priority, and the very highest was reinvesting and repairing what we have. But it's also interesting to note there wasn't anything that got like no funding sort of allocated to it. So everyone thought that the priorities were the priorities, but really elevated those two. And then the prioritization of the goals. So there are these 7 goals that were identified early in the process when we were looking at the mission and the vision for the department. And again, I think relative confirmation that all of these were important, but we did kind of a forced choice. People couldn't say, oh, I like all 7. They had to choose their top couple. And so safety and maintenance came out on top again, followed by community needs, responding to the needs and desires of the residents. So we took all of that input and all the work that the staff did in terms of the asset management, kind of looking at the conditions of not just the parks as a whole, but individual amenities and assets within those parks, and developed the draft plan. That was seeking to answer 4 key questions. So how does the number, quality, and proximity of the parks and recreation facilities and amenities compare to local and national benchmarks? So it's always great to strive to do better, but there was the strong interest from the department as well as residents to kind of know how we stacked up against other folks. Second, to what degree do those facilities and amenities along with the events and programs held at those facilities meet the diverse needs of all members of the community? So were we doing a really good job serving a portion of the community and sort of maybe ignorant of or unintentionally ignoring the needs of some of our residents? Number 3, what gaps exist in Northglenn's parks and recreation system? So are there places where there's geographies where residents or maybe employees are unserved or underserved? And likewise, that could be access to a park. It could also be a certain recreational amenity or programming. And then lastly, what gaps exist in Northglenn's parks and recreation system? So the plan itself is organized into these 6 chapters and then the appendix, or I guess it's, yeah, we did count the first as a chapter. So the executive summary, existing conditions, kind of tracking with that planning process, the needs assessment, financial strategy, so how would we fund the recommendations, and then the recommendations themselves in detail, standards and recommendations, and an implementation plan. The appendix has a bunch of the detail in there. So the executive summary includes an introduction to the plan, to the department, to the history of parks and recreation in Northglenn, the purpose and process of the planning effort, update to the mission and vision, which I'll share in just a second, and then the goals. The mission and vision have been updated. We've shared this actually when we gave you the previous update, I think it was last summer, and incorporated a couple of tweaks that came from the advisory board as well as from this body. The existing conditions, it actually has a community profile, builds on the work that was done for the comprehensive plan, and then looks at the system. So parks and open space and established refined, I guess, updated the categorization system, so the park classifications, and then looked at trails and programming within that, and basically just sort of summarized all of that. This is probably the most concise summary of that. It's showing developed, undeveloped, and other property on the left-hand side. And then you can see across the top how many sites in different categories, the total acres, and then the park names. And so if you want to dig in more detail there's more in the plan itself in this chapter as well as in the appendix. The needs assessment, as I said, there's it's kind of a standard approach to this generally. It has evolved a bit over the years. It wasn't that long ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, where really there was an aspect of doing a community survey or some engagement to get the community desires kind of component of it. On the data side, it was really just looking at parks and the service areas associated with the parks. And usually that was done with a buffer around the parks. And then finally, how many park acres do you have per resident or 10,000 residents? And we took that a step further. We looked at access to parks using the actual street network and pedestrian network. So can people get to those places? We looked at different standards and benchmarks, comparing across the region as well as nationally. And then we incorporated that community feedback in, I think, a pretty meaningful, impactful way. So that looking at sort of the access component of it, we looked at access around the different types of parks and amenities, and as well as the trail network that was proposed in the transportation plan, identifying different gaps within service. And then the financial strategy began to sort of frame, kind of set parameters around what would those recommendations and standards be. Obviously, you don't want to plan for, envision, create recommendations for, I don't know, I was going to say a Cadillac. Maybe a Tesla is like a better standard now, a Tesla, when you have the budget for a Kia. A really great car, but, right? And I think Northglenn isn't at either end of the spectrum. It's somewhere in between, maybe a little bit up on the upper end in terms of the quality of facilities, particularly given the investment that has been made. And so we want to continue to do that and do that in respect to the budget that is available. So the financial strategy looked at where funds have come from historically, where those were expected to come from moving forward. There's a cost of service analysis, which was pretty interesting to kind of work through. And then specifically the financial recommendations are identified in that chapter. The standards and recommendations, we went through those same, just like the existing conditions. We looked at parks and facilities by the different classifications or categories, the trails, and identified recommendations for programs. Looked at which of those recommendations move the dial in the different goal areas. So it's become a little bit of a pet peeve of mine in planning efforts where we do some visioning and goal setting, and then it just kind of lives in that front chapter, and we never kind of revisit it. And so this was we kind of developed a mechanism working with the staff to sort of track back those recommendations to the goals and make sure that we had enough recommendations we felt to be impactful in actually achieving the goals, and that no sort of goal was being overemphasized in the recommendations. And then there's park maintenance standards within the plan as well, which had been in existence previously, but we're in a few different spots, and we were able to update through this process as well. And then the implementation plan. So one of the things that we tried to do was, again, working closely with staff, kind of threading the needle, where this is we're looking out 10, 15 years, so we can be pretty sure what, the department is going to do and what the city, our recommendation would be for the city to do in the next year, maybe 2 years. But when you start to get out to that 5, 8, 10, plus year time frame, it becomes a little looser, and you're not quite sure what things may come about in terms of budgetary constraints, in terms of external factors. We saw, it's an extreme example, of course, but COVID, really increased the usage of parks, and so there's certain wear and tear that happened more quickly than we would have expected. So there may be other things we may not anticipate. So creating specificity and flexibility and kind of striking that appropriate balance. But we identify specific capital projects, funding, and different sources, which I'll get to in a second in the implementation plan overview. And then the appendices include the details of the inventory, the park profiles, the survey results, benchmarking that we did with sort of like communities, and then the capital projects matrix. So some highlights of the implementation plan. I gave a couple of previews here, I guess, but capital projects, most are in those categories of creating more unique features, which was something that was highlighted throughout the process that I haven't really mentioned yet, but a sense that the parks are really sort of near and dear to folks, especially those in their neighborhoods, and looking at ways to sort of celebrate the unique identity of the parks versus having a formulaic approach where every park is exactly the same. So looking at what are those unique features and opportunities in a park based on its unique sort of natural attributes, what's there already, as well as the surrounding neighborhood and what their interests and desires were. Reinvestment being looking at those assets within parks that are aging, may have aged out already, or we can work on some preventative maintenance to avoid some pretty high ticket items. And then universal access and seating and gathering, kind of following up as far as the number of projects, cost being a different story, of course. At the bottom, there's only 2 of them, but importantly, new park development. So improving some of the existing parkland that exists that has not been brought into sort of active park state. The capital projects also were broken down by location. So we have broke that down by funded projects as well as unfunded projects, and then some priority updates when it comes to policy and planning. So those are relatively low. They take time and money in terms of staff time typically, but a little different than those capital investments in terms of scale. And usually a little lower hanging fruit. You know, some of those capital projects require a design process that might be a year or two, and then the construction, whereas some of those other aspects could happen a little more quickly. On the programming side I mentioned, the real emphasis was probably on more of the communications and marketing of the programming, but we did identify some opportunities for some new programs in studio and visual art, and STEM, skateboarding and roller skating, as well as sand volleyball were identified as desires, and then expanding some programs, and then also looking at, are there opportunities whereby there can be things offered in Northglenn, perhaps at Northglenn facilities, but not necessarily by the staff, or through partnerships. So, hopefully I was brief enough. Relatively quick overview. I know we probably presented some of that to at least most of you before, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at the plan. But yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback on anything around the process, the plan itself, most importantly, that draft plan. We want to make sure that it is not only reflective of the community that we heard from throughout the process, but reflective of all of you as well, and your thoughts.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Undeveloped, we hear a lot about Odell Berry Park. Where is Grant Park and Scout Park? What? Are they? I couldn't find them on the map. I was looking. I did try to answer my own question.
So Scout Park is at Highline Drive and Malley.
Okay.
And it's just tucked right between kind of the I-25 and the residential properties off of Highline, sort of next to where Community Reach is. We currently use it as a archery space, but it's got some limited use there. And then Grant Park is really named because there was some grant funding that came in there. I don't know that that's why it was named Grant Park, but it's a small area of improvement along the trail. So it really appears as a trail improvement.
That's the one by Kiwanis, kind of.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm looking at the map on page 23, and I really was trying to find it. So Grant, Scout, and Odell Berry were the undeveloped sites on slide 21.
Correct.
And so then on slide 23, they're indicated by purple, but I'm not finding it. I apologize. So I guess I was wondering, like, especially if Councilmember Goff knows where they are they truly undeveloped, or are they?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
They're just spaces, but they're named. Okay. But we're talking about the difference between park and playground?
No, just undeveloped park space.
Undeveloped park space.
So it's designated as a park. It's zoned as park spaces, and it is, but is undeveloped. We haven't made any improvements to those sites, or very minimal improvements to those sites.
Madam Mayor, page 163.
I know, I didn't go that far. I was looking at the map on page 20, like there. Can you help me out? Oh, Jay's just going to point it out. Well, I saw that, Grant Park Natural Area. Okay.
They don't have, Scott Park is not on there.
Okay. I was just wondering, I don't know if it needs to be. I just happen to be looking at this map and the key.
No,
okay. Those things didn't line up for me. Got it. Thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple programmatic and then a facility question. First of all, thank you for this very extensive analysis and report. Really appreciate that. You know, I think back to the demographics of our city, and 1 out of 5 residents are under the age of 19. So it tends to get me to think that maybe we don't have enough in terms of youth programming for teens or preteens. So, I was looking at page 31 and just trying to reconcile my mind. I think that's the bar graph chart, how programming is actually fourth in priority at $578,000. So I just wanted to kind of square that in my mind about how you think about the demographics of our city and how that drives demand for certain programming.
Yeah. I can start and Amanda can add if she'd like. So yeah, we did look at not just the demographics today, but we actually looked historically, sort of what has changed over the last 5 to 10 years, and then tried to project out and kind of think about what is a demographic going to be. And I think, as you all know, your demographic has shifted younger over the in the recent past. Interestingly, on the programming side, we got a lot of feedback that there was like, oh, there's a ton of programming for youth. What about us adults? And so, and we did engage youth in several of the focus groups, and tried to sort of target events for the pop-ups also, where we're getting youth input. We didn't hear a lot about younger youth, but there was sort of the teen population where there is programming, of course, and Amanda can speak to specifics if she'd like, but there was a thought that, maybe there could be more done to sort of capture that group and give them more opportunity to engage in the programming.
Okay, gotcha.
The only thing I would add is that the plan, as I said, is really a very high-level document that guides us into the future. It doesn't include every detail. And so part of that programming plan that you see in the implementation plan is diving deeper into programming, looking at where our gaps are, and that being identified as a project through this plan. Like, that's kind of that high level, and then we start to dig down into that greater level of detail that does evolve over the years, and looking at all of the programming we have. What day of the week is it on? And you see that in the plan there's a matrix that includes what we offer now based on what age, where are those programs held? Are they indoors or outdoors? Who are they serving? What is the interest, to help us start to identify those gaps? But as we go into that program plan development, which staff will do, start to further identify where are we missing? Do we have everything for 2 to 5 year olds on a Saturday morning and somebody's not available at that time? Therefore, if you are looking for things during the week, you feel like we don't have anything to offer you. How do we really get into that level of detail to figure out what makes sense for our community? What needs are there? How can we fit them into our space? And what's really meeting those needs for our residents? Does that
yes, it
start
does.
To answer your question?
Well, leads me to my segues to a second question, more 20,000 foot level. And I did not review the entire package, but I'm just curious, as part of the scope of your analysis, did you look at potentially maybe a joint partnership with Thornton or Westy to kind of be able to broaden or add more offerings or availabilities for certain programs? Was that in scope for this analysis or not?
It was not in the scope of the analysis. We did look at surrounding communities, some of the surrounding communities in terms of what they offered, in terms of the benchmarking, but we didn't go down that path of looking at partnerships. I don't know if that's something you've explored.
So staff have started to gently go down that path. We have not gone very far down that path, but we know that our neighbors have some great offerings and vice versa. And we've had some conversation about how can we complement one another and provide our residents with the greatest level of service. So that would be something I would expect to come out of that programming plan.
Okay. And then my last question, which is more facilities. I was intrigued on page 150 of your document where you talk about the overpass, pedestrian overpass. I think this is the Centennial Park, longer-term wish list. So it just prompts me to ask the question, is the I-25 pedestrian overpass, is that Parks, Recs, and Culture, O&M, both? How do you?
It has not typically fallen under Parks, Rec, and Culture specifically as a budgeted item, but it's certainly an amenity that whether it's on the roadway or as a part of a park or as a part of our trail or sidewalk system. Those are all ways that our community members reach the amenities that we have to offer. So we really look at those jointly.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So thank you so much for this very in-depth presentation. I was liaison to the Parks and Rec Board back when we started this, so I'm super stoked to see like where it sort of landed. I have heard you mention a few times, you know, marketing, promotion, and that's sort of been a key issue. I don't see anything in this plan about it. It is pretty extensive, but I don't think I really missed it. I think that's out of your scope, I assume. Okay, cool. And then the other thing I was thinking piggyback sort of off of Councilmember Condo's, is I wonder if we would do a trial to actually like promote all of our offerings and see then what are the true gaps. Because I think that would make a lot more financial sense and just, you know, just sense in general, because if people don't know what we offer, you know, then we can't correctly fill gaps if people don't even know what we have. And I think so I would recommend, thinking out loud here, maybe just doing like a trial of like an updated promotional plan and then really looking into the gaps after that, after people fully understand what we actually offer in the city, which is a lot and which is great. So I just think people just need to be able to Google us.
We agree, and I can let Jay jump in here if he has anything to add. Although their scope wasn't to develop that plan, part of the recommendations, or one of the recommendations within the implementation section of the plan, is to further develop that that communications plan.
Cool, love that. Maybe just like look at rec tracks too, because it's not very mobile friendly.
Councilmember Nowicki.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you both for being here and for this report. It's quite thorough, and I really appreciate all the work that went into it. Maybe I'm late to the party here, but I just wanted to speak to Waco Park since it is in my ward. I think one of the challenges with my ward is that the park, the amenities for kids are usually tied to schools. So if, and I've heard from a couple residents that, you know, if school's in session, then they don't have access. And I experienced this when I would take my daughter around, you know, while school was in session, that we didn't necessarily have a park that we could access in our neighborhood. So I am glad to see on the Waco Park page where there's the piece about the 2 to 5 year old playground, kind of replacing that backstop, because I also believe that that's kind of a great area for parents to kind of sit and congregate. There's a couple benches, there's some beautiful trees that really look great in the fall. So I just kind of wanted to put a plug there. But overall, I really appreciate this report. And again, I think it does a really good job of, you know, assessing what we have in our parks, and really goes to show that the city puts a lot of thought into this. Thank you.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the awesome presentation. Very, very thorough. So I'm on page 68 of our presentation. I don't know if it's different on yours. It's the Connect Northglenn recommendations. And so I noticed that near Scout Park, there's along 112th, there is a underpass under I-25. And I know it's kind of a forgotten underpass right there. I see that it doesn't quite connect, or it's not part of the shared use path. I'm looking at the yellow dotted line. It goes from Ward 4. Yeah, so it's like it goes just south of the Justice Center. Was that, I just don't see it really, I guess, included in the continuity of the Connect Northglenn? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Right here? Yeah, so I think that's a great opportunity right there too. It's right where Scout Park is, where we're talking about, like, it's kind of forgotten. I just think that's something that would be really easy for people in Ward 1 and Ward 2 and another, also Ward 3 to, you know, bridge over to well, actually go under I-25, and I've just noticed not a lot of attention's been really brought to that area, and a really good opportunity for this moving forward in the next, few years. Even with Scout Park, keeping it more of like a nature area, possibly just more trees, deal with more, air quality, cooling it down, making it so like there, like really like there's nothing there. There's like dead trees, and I just trying to think of how we can really connect the east and the west side of Northglenn. I think that's a really great opportunity that I think not too many people know about, and just wanted to bring that up.
No, that's a great point. I need to dig into it a little deeper because I don't know if it's a remnant of our mapping or, you know what I mean, as far as what you were seeing on the map. But yeah, I agree with, in terms of it being a really critical connection that's underused today, right? And it, creating an opportunity to promote better access to recreation. And as you've highlighted it well, but connecting the east and west sides of Northglenn, I think, is a key priority for everybody across all groups, including Parks and Recreation.
Absolutely, yeah. It'll connect to future Odell Berry Park, to Northglenn Marketplace. I know I had friends who would ride their bikes from my ward over to Northglenn High School and use that same one. And I guess it's just something that's, needs to shed some light on it. Just, I think that's a great opportunity there.
I think that's what really this Connect Northglenn element that we took straight from the Connect Northglenn bicycle and pedestrian plan and incorporated here is to do just that. How do we make those connections? How do we take those spaces that trails exist? They may be close, but how do we make sure you can get from one to the next?
Right, absolutely. I think it's another good opportunity because we have, 120th, we have the overpass closer towards 104th, but we also have 112th where it's going uphill. Maybe it's all pretty level, so I think that's the route I would take if I was crossing there on foot or on bike. So, yeah, I'd just like to see that on there, possibly moving forward. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to both of you for being here. Very informative. I did look through the whole packet. It took me a while. I tried to make notes as I went along. Mostly I just have some questions on some really interesting things that stand out. I would love if you could explain a little bit more about night sky friendly pedestrian lighting as part of the SEPTED program. I've heard of like the light pollution, obviously, and using that type of lighting to minimize that, but that really piqued my interest, so I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so the night sky friendly lighting, it's just what you're kind of thinking. It's a way to mitigate the light pollution that typically comes from well-lit places, just at least through the traditional kind of means of lighting. So it's a combination of things, actually. Sort of down lighting is a piece of it, like rather than just having a bulb that is not shaded in any fashion, the light would just sort of emit into the air. So that's a piece of it. Also, the sort of the amount of light that it's casting. So some light fixtures are just like at the top level of what could be possible versus what may be appropriate for the area. And then there's some smart technology too that, it's not even that smart, I guess, at this point, but just like sensors. So we've recommended, installed, some lighting like that as well, where, it's pretty dim. You can kind of see generally what's happening, but as you approach, then that light increases. And so you get more light like when you're closer. So that's energy savings as well, but more so the night sky friendly lighting. And then the temperature of the lighting kind of comes into play too. So how warm or cool is it? So all those things, light level, the temperature of the lighting, is there variability in the level or the light level? and then which way is it being sort of cast. So the pedestrian lighting, we'd want lighting that is, you know, sort of an average temperature. It's not overly lit, but most importantly, it's putting the light where you want it on the walkways, where people are, versus just kind of shooting it out everywhere.
Yeah, that's brilliant, actually. That makes a lot of sense, and especially for the area in the Northwest open space, I believe is where I saw it, because it's very dark. Like, my backyard looks out into that area, and things go on there all the time. So I'm not surprised, one, that safety is a priority when it comes to residents' concerns and the community input, because I do hear that a lot, especially in Ward 4 with that Northwest open space area. But also just hearing what you're saying, how innovative that is, which is why we really appreciate you for bringing all these great ideas, and Director Peterson, of course. I'm wondering, there's got to be maybe potentially some funding for that, because that's, you know, light pollution is just like our building here that we potentially missed out on some funding. Hopefully maybe there's something. And I know you're amazing at getting any grant that exists possibly, so I'm sure you probably already thought about it.
Only I had that power. No, it's definitely a standard we've started to implement already. It's a question that gets asked by the Adams County Open Space Advisory Board. The dark sky compliant lighting minimizes impacts to birds and wildlife, in addition to that light spill that can impact residents. So even things that are as well lit as, say, J.C. Ball Field still have some night sky components to them in terms of how they're shaded, where that light spill is going. It's not, there's so much more control that they have now over where that light spill takes place that you really can limit it to the boundaries of the park or of the play feature or whatever it is that you're trying to light, without just truly excess lighting.
Mm-hmm. And then that's great, thank you for that information. The other question I had, kind of piggybacks on what Councilman Recondo was saying about youth. How many youth were interviewed or participated in the survey? I don't know if I saw that. I looked at some of the numbers, but I think I saw just adult breakdown, I believe. I didn't see young folks.
The Youth Commission participated, as well as a couple of other individuals, during the public engagement portion. But we also had youth and families represented in the and we have that in the appendix as you look at the breakdown of who completed that survey and who the members of those households are. So I can certainly dig into that further. I don't know it off the top of my head.
No, that's great. I was just looking at that. I think it's page 21, possibly in here. Decline in youth sports participation and activating our skate park. Really interested in seeing how those potential partnerships might work out. You know, been asking, get some celebrity status skateboarders in here, or somebody that's just willing to do something for those kids to activate it, since we get a lot of comments and concerns in that area not being safe because it's being used for other things. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how we activate that. And then I had some other questions, but I think there's two more. One, I saw a lot of comments on freezing pool. Are we doing anything to make the pool warmer? Sorry, the seniors, like, the pool is cold.
So it's definitely feedback we accept and respond to. It's not in the plan because it's really smaller. That's kind of that in the details, whereas this is really big picture. But Justin Perdue, who's here behind me, at least I think he's still here, is responsive to those inquiries. Challenge we have just is the difference between the air temperature and the water temperature, but we do post that water temperature all of the time, so anybody is able to see what standard we're keeping both pools at. One pool is slightly warmer than the other pool. Happy to go into that in further detail, but again, not specifically in the plan.
Just the messenger. That sounds
we appreciate
great.
that. No, and we really want to hear that from our residents, and even if we can't adjust the pool temperature to meet every single person's needs, we want to be able to have those conversations and hear from them and help understand what the concern is, as well as how the pool is maintained.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I'm good with that. The last question I had was J.D. Clayton Park. I didn't know, it says that Adams 12 owns it, but we maintain it, and there was an agreement, but now there's not?
Yes, so there's not a specific maintenance agreement on that property. We will continue to work with the school district on that property. It's their it's their parcel. They do occasionally rent that parcel out. It's very heavily used by the school itself. So most of the time it's used as a school playground. It's used for their base program. It's used for their summer program when they have a summer program in session there. It was named for a former principal of that school. And so it's in our naming program, but it is district property. So it's a partnership.
So would they partner to help improve amenities potentially? I mean,
the playground is actually on their side of it, or where it's not even within what we consider the park boundaries. So that is a school district improvement.
Okay, that's all.
Our maintenance of it is truly of just the irrigation and landscaping.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Couple of questions. I'm looking at slide 30, and it has the capital projects. Some are funded, some are unfunded. The Huron Crossing Park, we've heard a couple weeks in a row now from a resident that lives right there. Can you speak to, it says fencing to enhance the safety between the basketball court and adjacent roadway. We heard tonight also about lighting. Can you or even City Manager Geyer speak to the feedback from the resident and what changes have been proposed, or if not, why not?
Yes, and Jay can jump in here as well, because we did talk specifically about that park based on concerns that were brought forward to us.
Okay.
We did ask in very broad terms. I purposefully did not give Jay all of the details, because I wanted him to be able to look at that space very objectively and identify where we could make safety improvements if there were any concerns with the location of the basketball court, with potentially balls going into the roadway. So that played into the fence that we've had the budget, and that project, specifically the fence and some pedestrian lighting, came forward to you through the budget process. So in addition to what's in this plan, they came forward after we had MIG look at that a little closer.
Okay.
Additional improvements that are noted in Huron Crossing as recommendations that are unfunded at this time include connecting the trail east and west. It's one of those segments where we have neighborhood or residential sidewalk on both ends, but not for the length of the park. And so that piece that was referred to tonight of the bump out is to allow for trail connection to occur. So it would narrow the roadway a bit, which we've talked about that as a traffic calming measure. It's not completely the reason that it's recommended in here, but I think it came out of concerns for safety of kids walking, running across the street or not looking and slowing traffic down, but also came as a way of how do we connect our trail system and maintain that priority through the plan, especially when we have a park area that really has no trail connection to the residential sidewalk on either side without crossing the street. So that piece is not currently funded, and it would be a future consideration. So the two parts that are funded right now that we do intend to seek grant funding to fully be able to implement would be the short fence segment right behind the basketball hoop and the pedestrian lighting in the park to enhance safety.
Okay. And there was no discussion to move the basketball hoop?
That was something, and Jay can certainly respond to it. We left it wide open when we asked for his recommendations as to how to address those safety concerns, and the fence was the recommendation that was made.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Amanda said it, but yeah, we did look at reorienting the I guess the court ultimately, but yeah, the baskets.
Okay.
But ultimately, partly because of sort of the orientation of the court, we felt as though keeping and then also understanding all the different costs associated with this wish list of recommendations, we felt like the fence was probably the best way to go.
How high is the fence?
What?
How high is the fence?
I think we were recommending 8 foot, yeah. 8 foot?
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering. This resident has come forward multiple times, and her most recent feedback is that the ball's going to go over the fence, so I just wanted to know how high it was. Okay. Other questions? So I'm looking. What I heard just now, maybe I was mishearing, is that the priority project, so this specific one, was funded, but you're looking for grant money? Or it is funded?
The priority projects are items we have some amount of funding for. We can make that go farther if we're able to get grant funding to match those. So for the Huron Crossing one, we think that's a good candidate for grant funding from Adams County Open Space.
Okay.
So we have that slated, I believe, for a spring application, which would allow us still to complete the project in 2025. So taking those dollars we have specifically for the fence and leveraging those so that we're able to put additional lighting in that space.
Got it, okay.
So we have dollars for some project. We believe we can make it a little bit of bigger project.
Perfect. So I think the project and the playbook, it's beautiful. It has so much information in it. It's very well done. I think my brain automatically goes to how do we use it? What is the, function of this? And when I think about the length of the plan, 10, 15 years and beyond, how do we use it year after year, budget cycle after budget cycle, to help us make decisions? So an example that came to mind is we have Odell Berry Park. A lot of residents are very passionate about finding the funding, but if we're looking at $3+ million, if we were to have that money, build one park or do 25 park projects, how do we use this document to make that decision?
I think it's really this document combined with your strategic plan that you update on a more regular, might be the wrong term, but shorter intervals, right? Where you're looking at what are the needs of the community today, and then do the kind of broader strokes that are in the long range plan. Does that support that? And what guidance can that provide to us? In this case, depending on who you asked and when we asked in the process, we really got feedback on both. Hey, we really want Odell Berry Park to be a priority. And we also really want things that we have to be maintained. So what that says to me is we can't put all of our dollars, and even the exercise that we asked for community members to do that we really got a good response on, where we said, how would you divide these dollars on projects? And I think, I forget what slide number it was, but Jay showed you, it had like blue bars on it, and there were 2 top funded priorities, but there was nothing there where those 119 respondents said, I wouldn't put any dollars towards new development, or I wouldn't put any dollars towards existing. They really said, we want these dollars spread out over all of these priority areas. And so I think that's, although not necessarily the easiest information because we can't do it all. I wish we could. It does tell us our residents are asking for all of those things. So how do we balance those needs over time? And that's where sometimes grant funding comes in versus us coming to you during this budget cycle and saying, can we have $3.5 million for Odell Berry? And we're not going to ask for anything else. And that doesn't necessarily, based on what we've heard from our community members, what you all have heard from your community members, doesn't necessarily meet their needs or meet everyone's needs.
Right. So the playbook reminds me a little bit, and it can be perceived as sort of the Parks Department strategic plan. It's just much bigger. Is there a way, like as we move through time, that you're going to sort of check off things that have been completed? And I would hope that we as council would look at it in every budget season to see, is your department going to make annual recommendations for pieces that you think you can afford with your budget?
Yes. So even with our old plan that was less robust than this one, but that was something we as staff looked at every year. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board is obligated to review it every year. And so before we make budget recommendations as staff to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, before the board makes their recommendation to you, they're reviewing this plan, providing us feedback. We're no longer updating the actual plan every year. That used to be part of our process. That got cumbersome. So we now do an update every 5 years. So 5 years from now, in addition to those touch points on an annual basis, as we're doing, really as we're looking at budget, that's the big driver, is to do an appendix to this, an update that'll provide you that, hey, we're 5 years down the road. What has significantly changed that we need to make sure we're taking into consideration as we move forward?
Okay. It's just a big process in partnership with our overall strategic plan. And I think I looked at some of those pages and they talked about, here's unfunded ideas that are not in priority order. That's really big, and it makes me nervous. Who sets the priorities? Well, possibly. And it could be that it changes with the wind as far as either not only who is on council, but what resident comes forward with a passion project. I mean, I'm just going to note, I think disc golf is one thing we don't have. And when I saw that, I was like, what a great idea. Didn't even occur to me. But it's not prioritized. So that's hard to then go back to residents and say, hey, we also agree it's a good idea. Can't tell you if it's ever happening because it's not prioritized.
And we had a lot of conversation about that. How far should we prioritize in this document? And we were very intentional in leaving those items that aren't currently in your budget as non-prioritized, because we didn't want to be saying, we're stuck to this order. We're going to do this first and this second and this third. We really want to be able to hear from residents on a regular basis, hear from all of you on a regular basis, know what's happening in the market, with the budget, and adjust to that. We do our 5-year CIP, and so we're really looking out that 5-year period each time we look at the budget and identifying. So you'll start to see those ideas really move from unprioritized to prioritized, kind of through those 5-year CIP updates that happen each year on a rolling basis.
Yeah. And then what about the one-off idea that's super fun that's not in here?
This doesn't say that these are the only ideas we're ever going to do. Okay. There will always be new and unique things. Some of those we're going to ask that we look at in a longer term plan, right? Like when we do those 5-year updates. Some of those based on cost or how they may fit with the overall intent of the plan, your budget, the needs of the community, may be incorporated through just the annual budget process.
Great. Well, my last thought is just for council to remember that as we go into each annual review of our strategic plan, that we pull this out and that we look at it, and that we don't spin and create a huge list of new things when, as you mentioned, they're in this document. And then maybe we look at our money and figure out how to prioritize the ideas that have already been slated. So thank you. It looks like Councilmember Jaramillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. That's funny you mentioned disc golf because I wrote that down like right before you said that. So, I mean, we don't have very much park space left. I mean, I mentioned Scout Park before. You can imagine we'd have to plant way more trees, like I said, but also probably have to put more of a barrier between I-25 and possibly some netting or something. But, I mean, I could see potential there. I mean, honestly, what it resembles is what, you know, Carrick Bend and Stone Mountain looked like before we developed it and where our rec center is at currently. That's basically what it looked like when you were driving down what's now Community Center Drive. Basically looked like that. So there's potential, and you know, I just like to, you know, see if there's we can create some plans for these areas that just really untapped. Don't think there's the same opportunity at Grant Park because it's just really like along the what is that, the gulch or the floodplain and stuff. It doesn't seem like a very good place for an actual park. But yeah, I just had that idea too, and yeah, that'd be something fun because I know Brighton has one where at Benedict Park, my dad has a sculpture there, so I go and, you know, visit and check it out. So that's always something that I'd like to see. But you know, we don't have much more space left, so we gotta be diligent with our land use. But opportunity. But this is why we're here having the discussion, so we can hash out these ideas. So thanks again.
I was just gonna, Mayor Leidy, and it's kind of related to the comment about disc golf too. The unfunded project list, unprioritized, unfunded project list. A lot of communities actually ask us to leave that out of a plan because they want a sort of budget constrained list of to-dos. They don't want to put anything out there that is not going to be funded or going to be implemented in the next couple of years. And so I think that was a discussion, as Amanda alluded to. I think there's a couple of different reasons to include them. One, there were people who engaged in this process, and they might have been one of 3 people who mentioned a certain thing. And we want to make sure that their voice was still reflected in the plan. Mm-hmm. And 2, you mentioned it earlier, you have this super grant writer or grant seeker over here, and there may be other opportunities, and maybe some folks back there too. But yeah, there may be other opportunities through partnerships, things like that. Maybe there's donation of land, for an even more suitable disc golf course, things like that. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't preclude those opportunities that, as you said, we can't anticipate right now.
Yeah, I think that's great. Gives us a ton of information. It's very thorough. And I know you spent a lot of time on it, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come forward here just to this kind of wrap-up slide.
You got it to work, actually. Good job.
So, the project steps so far. Everything but that final document development plan, piece is checked off the list, which is very exciting for us. And really what we're looking for tonight is your feedback to move forward with the rest of the process. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board has already reviewed the document and provided their support to move it on to you for approval. Depending on what feedback you provided us tonight, we could bring that back to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board if there was anything significant. I haven't heard anything that would warrant bringing it back to the board at this stage. So what we would ask is we will take a look at a few things that were mentioned tonight, can incorporate any council feedback, and then we would like to bring it back to you for adoption here prior to the end of the year.
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
All right, next up, Civic Center Visioning Phase 3. Director of Planning and Development, Brooks Svoboda, is going to introduce this item.
So in case you hadn't guessed, it's the Jay Rankin show tonight.
It is.
So I will introduce Jay here. We are... There we go. So Jay Rickens, MIG, and Mark Delatorre are here tonight to talk through the slide deck. I would also just point out that in the staff report, there are 3 topics of discussion, prepositions for you guys to take into account in this conversation this evening. And so just sort of think that as we go through this, the idea here is that we are looking to solicit your feedback and your guidance and direction on this. And I just would, with an opening remark, is that the 2017 and the 2022 goals and objectives has been the guardrails and the guideposts for us as staff to carry out and execute staff's vision. And so I think it's really important for us, as we hear your feedback tonight, to be thinking in those terms, because ideally what we're trying to do here is to help promulgate a vision that we can go out and communicate, not just to you as the council, but also to the community, that we are in fact meeting those expectations. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jay.
Thanks, Brooke. Hello again.
Hi.
I think most of you know MIG and me personally have been involved in the Civic Center project before it was a project. There was the fiscal sustainability study, I think was conducted in 2015, where it sort of contemplated, that this was a potential, I think at the time, just a redevelopment opportunity of the civic uses, and then through that Civic Center process that sort of evolved. So excited to be back with you all tonight to kind of think about that next chapter. So exciting to be in this building as a piece of the overall project. It's actually my first time in the building, so super excited. What we want to do rather quickly, honestly, is kind of review vision, goals, and objectives from the previous plan, as Brooke mentioned. Talk about some some elements that came out of some of the work that I did with some of you in 2022, and then really, move to a conversation where we're hearing from you all about, what has changed, what hasn't changed, what do we want to see as the site continues to sort of build out. What are those important elements and expectations that you all have, reflecting your own desires, but as well as those of the community. So our timeline for the project, I think this is in your packet as well. So this is our first work session. We'll be back with you in early December for a second work session. We're going to take the input that we received this evening and develop some different scenarios for you all to look at. We'll make sure that those reflect sort of everything we hear. In the case where there's maybe some, differing of opinions, or, there's obviously limited space and that sort of thing. We'll try to explore as many of those options as possible. And then really digging deep into those alternatives moving forward with the market feasibility analysis. So making sure that we're not creating some sort of unfunded mandate or unsupported mandate. And then looking forward into 2025, even further, some engagement and presentation of a preferred development plan. So some of the key elements of sort of where we left things in 2022. If you recall, there was sort of a revisiting of the development plan that you had with the P3 partner. We talked about what were some of those critical elements and updated the site plan accordingly. So this is the illustrative on the right-hand side, but I think more importantly is some of these bullets that came out of some of those conversations. So City Hall being a more welcoming and respectful edge along Community Center Drive. For anyone who's not aware, the master plan had that deeper into the site. In essence, on the southern kind of footprint of the existing, or the former rec center, senior center, and theater. More integrated commercial opportunities for additional ground floor activation along Memorial Parkway. And I think that ties to kind of the bigger idea of wanting this to be a place that you're proud to bring your friends and family, out-of-town guests, that people want to come and spend at least a part of their day, if not their day. And so that idea that Memorial Parkway could be that, potentially, with commercial uses of different types. City Hall fronting E.B. Raines Park and Veterans Memorial was another piece of that that shift, and kind of looking at the adjacencies of not only what was best for the site and kind of providing a front door to the Civic Center campus, but also what is that relationship to E.B. Raines Park, kind of a signature space, not just for Northglenn, but I think of the North Metro area, and Veterans Park, which got such a great treatment in sort of the redo, or I guess not redo, the creation of Memorial Parkway. Better cross-development connections and circulation. That was feedback on that development scenario that had been created prior to our re-engagement. And basically it was that there was a lot of disparate parts, and it seemed as though to really travel anywhere on the site, you were going to be cutting through, unless you are Memorial Parkway, that you're going to be cutting through parking lots. So thinking about how we might mitigate that. Integrating small parks, plazas, and green spaces throughout the development, and then looking at a greater diversity of housing options. And again, those came out of council discussions in early 2020 or early 2022, and were reflected in that site plan. So kind of a less illustrative, less inspirational version of that is shown here on the right, which was really a development program diagram that was developed in partnership with the development partner at that time. So you can see really kind of specifically the some of the key connections on there, some of the development. If you look at the colored boxes, those would be the buildings that were being proposed. So obviously the City Hall footprint is a little different, but in that general location. So that's really the only piece that's been implemented. The others included some commercial space, particularly sort of hugging that corner by the Veterans Memorial. But at the time there was discussion about making sure there was enough of a buffer there, if you recall, to make sure that it wasn't sort of commercializing the memorial. I mentioned the City Hall already. Townhomes became a pretty prominent product on the site through this phase of the discussion. And then apartments in 4 buildings. And if you remember, Continuum, who was that P3 partner at the time, we're talking about AMI housing, a variety of, it's kind of a non-conventional approach to delivery of affordable housing, but ultimately affordable housing on the site. This was an illustrative diagram that we had created, kind of showing what that could look like if, done to a high degree of quality, reflective of what has already been done for this facility, as well as the recreation center, theater, and senior center. And really, that's largely the extent of the presentation. I can answer questions. Brooke and Mark are here to help me as well. But for the discussion, what we wanted to tee up were the 2017 master plan goals. So that include enhancing a stronger community identity. So there was a sense that at that time, that Northglenn sort of lacked a heart, a physical heart of the community. So that being a piece of that, integrating a vibrant mix of land use, evaluating the best location and design of municipal facilities, providing public gathering spaces. So it wasn't enough to just have sort of green space and turf, but to have actual community gathering spaces, leveraging the success of adjacent developments, and that particularly speaking to Webster Lake Promenade at the time, and then strengthening the connections to the site, from the site to E.B. Rains Park, to the Webster Lake Promenade, and other development. The master plan principles, those guided the planning process itself, as well as the idea was that it would help to guide development. So they're elaborated on in the plan. I think that was included in your packet, but vibrant, valuable, strategic, connected, sustainable, and contextual. And then there's a summary again of the council takeaways from those discussions in late 21, early 2022. So with that, first question I have for you all, if you'll entertain that, is do you feel the prior direction from the master plan and the work update to the site in 2022 still reflects the vision held by you in the community? And if that's changed in any way, if you could elaborate on what some of those changes are. And I think Mark's going to be taking notes. I'll try to jot down some notes as well. And we'll make sure that this is reflected in the scenarios that we develop for you in early December.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, just contextually, I was not on council in 2017, so my time here is about 2.5 years, I guess. To answer your question, what's different from 2024 and 2017? I'll just try and be brief. COVID, supply chain, cost of materials, direct labor cost, all of that I think is much more expensive. I was at a luncheon with our Mayor Pro Tem, and I didn't realize this was a little bit of a sticker shock for me, but this building was completed at $33.7 million, and I think pre-pandemic the price tag was about $9 million cheaper. And the other thing I think about, I suppose, given my private industry experience, is the economy is just totally different. Mm-hmm. And market rate developers probably, what they thought and what they wanted to do in 2017 is vastly different than what it is now, today in 2024. So you're asking me, is the vision that was established back 7 years ago relevant? I'm not sure.
That's not the question.
I will read the question. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do you feel the prior direction from the master plan, 2017, and the update? I think we need to be reasonable and think about what are market rate developers, what's motivating them now? Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that statement is 3 months ago I did a workshop with the Urban Land Institute. This was the Metro Mayor Caucus / Dr. Cog. And quite honestly, it was very much an eye-opener for me, because the workshop was to put yourself in the shoes of the market rate developer. And here are the metrics and the parameters that the city wanted, like a certain 5-year tax revenue target, or the market rate developer had a 13% return on investment. And so all of those things really changed with the economy. And my sense is we need to go back to looking at that and understand what's motivating and driving people economically, and making sure that what we want is going to pencil out.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think I want to set the context a little bit, because it's true, council has changed a little bit. And while I don't miss the 80 million slides that Brooke has in his pocket, it does provide some context for where we've been and how we've gotten here. So thinking about 2017 and the vision that was created there, it was a bit of a rough road between 2017 and 2022. So there was a developer, we cut ties with that developer. Jay came in, interviewed every single council member, and then brought us back our current rendition. When I think to the question that you have here, between 2022 and today, I think we've already budgeted for another plan, another moment of time with you. And so we've had conversations about parking, and we have the market. Those are the two things to me that have to be considered, which it does seem to be reflected in your presentation. So when I look, I don't know if you can go back to an image. So that was our most recent, like, yes plan, right? And it has some of those elements, vision. Obviously, it's going to cost different, but this is not us writing a check. We need to get a developer to do this with us. We need to find out what the market will hold. But the last conversation we had as a council about this was about parking. And on the table was like a $7 million parking garage, which I don't think makes a ton of sense. When I went back to this after the parking discussion, there is a row of what I'm guessing is townhomes directly across from the senior center.
Yes.
And there's a row right to the left of it.
Yes. Yeah, on the south edge of the site.
Right. And so I guess as if we start to workshop it, when we go back to market, when we have a conversation, I don't want to wipe out a whole chunk of land for parking, but I do think we can find additional parking.
Yeah.
Very small pieces to add to it, closest to where people need to be. Obviously, putting parking way over here is not going to help anybody. But when you're talking about vision, because that's the work you do, that's not the work we do, as much as we like to move Legos around. The work that you do is to take our thoughts and vision and passion about our city, and then you put it into a plan that meets the market, right? So when I go back to council takeaways from 21-22, those things are still in place for me. A strong desire for destination. So place, little teeny shops, not a whole bunch, you know, right? We talk about a little coffee shop, little ice cream shop, little pizza shop, whatever, so that you have that destination, a little bit of retail and community use, and then all of those other things. And I think that's what we do. We don't move the buildings around. We don't do the market study. That's what you do. So my passion is still there, including the excitement for more detail in next steps. Because my experience working with Jay, how he was able to take 9 people's ideas and put them into a vision that met the market at the time, it's brilliant. So I hope you'll stay along for the ride.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm definitely not asking you to do our job for us.
Yes, no, and I just, I want to make sure that we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as someone who has been part of zero of these discussions and is completely new to this, I would have to say I would agree with Mayor Lighty with like the vision, the like aspirational, the like intangibleness of like creating this like vibrant space that's like what I think of this to really be is like third space for our community members. That's like where my head is. We don't have those. I mean, I could wax poetic about, you know, our loneliness epidemic and social media and all of this stuff, but like this is like what I would like to see out of this. I do think it's kind of weird to put so much housing because I wouldn't want to live as like and as the demographic and average age of representation of Northglenn, like I think it's kind of weird, but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to live by City Hall, I guess, is my perspective as a person. But I would like to be able to come here, do business. Would love a bar, would love a coffee shop, would love a cool hang, and like place like at like especially like if my kids are at the rec center, like I want a space for moms. Like that's what I'm looking for. But I think like the heart and soul of this and like the actual vision is still correct from 2022.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And to address your your question, Jay, about the master plan from the past. I do feel, yes, we have enhanced our community identity. We have an awesome new branding with our logo, of course, our new facilities, the rec center, the theater, and now here, the city hall. And we dressed public gathering places, festival lawn. I mean, I'm not sure how much more we want to, if we want to expand that or not. Another gathering place, of course, you mentioned it, the veterans. But what I'm still trying to trying to think of like how we're gonna use this mixed use and like really try to best utilize it. You know, I've seen examples like what Westminster's done at the old Westminster Mall, or there's the at Stapleton, you know, what they're doing over there with like the Stanley.
Stanley Marketplace.
Yeah, I did a mural there. I thought it was pretty cool, like that they have just different kinds of use. But whatever we do, just got to be right, and that's my biggest conundrum, like, you know, going into the future, because it's gonna be here for longevity. So that's why we look to you. That's why we were like, we gotta have Jay here. He's been there, so with us. So yeah. And I've been living here too, so I get it. Like I'm like, okay. I digress. But I just want to see maybe if we can reach a new, updated visual that has, the new city hall. Maybe we try to just utilize what we now have. I know it hasn't really changed much. You still have the space there, but I just look at it and I feel like I'm just going back in time to when we were next door and we're already here now, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to put this one in the past a little bit and have a new rendition for the future, and what that could be, because this is what's making me really want to run again for another term, is make sure having some kind of idea of what it's going to look like. That's something that intrigues me, but I look to you as the expert. So just like to see what you have moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nowicki.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for being here, Jay.
Yeah.
So I, too, was not on council when this was discussed. I've kind of vaguely followed this, but seeing it come together and being a part of this has been really special for me. So I think, I think a lot has been said that's very useful. You know, obviously COVID kind of changed a lot of things. I do think, you know, one of the things, I think some of the master plan goals kind of still, you know, having a stronger community identity. I don't know where it was said or if it was said or if I'm hallucinating, but really having this kind of, this area be the heart of the community. You know, I really like that idea. You know, I'm thinking of a place again where, and this building very much has that, you know, kind of being in that space where when they open all the doors and stuff, you can be near the park, and I can just imagine kind of spending, I think like you said, half a day or even a day, you know, kind of taking my kids to the park, you know, going to, you know, Memorial Parkway, and, you know, I like I do think a lot of the council takeaways from 21, 22 still stand, you know, and I've heard some of the critiques about parking as well and some of those things. With regard to the housing piece, a couple of things. I do want to make sure, since we've had an opportunity to kind of use the park there, Memorial Park, or the lawn there, the festival lawn, that we're creating the space to, again, since we've had an opportunity to kind of have festivals there, and that we're making enough space, you know, to kind of continue to be able to do that and allow for loading, because we're not going to have that giant parking lot for loading and unloading. So making sure that, you know, we're accounting for some of those things for being able to, you know, because I assume we'd really want to kind of ramp up some events and even have kind of people be able to kind of rent some of those spaces, which would be really neat. As far as the housing piece, I do like the idea of having some type of mixed use, kind of in line with Carl's Farm. You know, looking over at Carl's Farm, the developments over there. A few times I've driven past, and it can be quite beautiful at times. That I think would really enhance that kind of community aspect to it, and you know, not only kind of serve the businesses here, but the businesses along 120th and Grant, and, you know, all those restaurants and things like that. So really, I think it would also kind of tie into those communities as well. But yeah, I am excited to kind of see what you come up with. Again, you know, having this kind of be like the jewel of the community, I think is kind of a great thing to guide us and work toward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I did have the fortune of being a part of the 21 and 22 revisioning process, and I absolutely think that those takeaways and that input is still very valid. All of those values and those principles still stand with me and what I've heard from residents and what they want. Obviously, some things will change, like parking. That has to be a part of this revisioning, and that would be the only thing that I probably want to change, and absolutely trust you to do the whole process of market feasibility and whatnot. I seem to recall, too, in part of that mixed-use housing, there's potential for some senior housing. I don't know if that's still, but I do remember that as well. Everything that I see here, you know, having those spaces for people, the little pocket parks and playgrounds, I think that's still so important, having those little green spaces tucked in and out of there. I remember us talking about making sure, and you mentioned this, that there's trails that go through the neighborhood, the campus, so that people can get from one end to the other, to, you know, taking their bicycle out and just hitting the trails and going for miles if they want to. So all of those things still stand. It's funny to see the shape of the old city, what the city hall would have looked like. But so we've come a long way, you know, and I think if anything, you know, the words that have been used, like the heart of Northglenn, the jewel is a great word. But I also remember us saying, you know, we don't have a downtown. And I think that downtown can have the heart, can have, you know, this is where you go to downtown Northglenn with the ice cream shops and the coffee shops. I've heard, hey, barbecue is a great thing too. You know, whatever that might be, right? That's all market feasibility and needs to be looked at. But I just want to say that I absolutely still think that we, you know, hold all those values, at least I do personally. I do think this is a conversation I just had today too. Also keeping in mind when, you know, when it's envisioned again or re-envisioned that safety is incorporated. So, you know, potentially that night sky lighting or making sure there's no areas where crime can happen, things like that. So involving and having that subted piece is super important. So just a reminder in that, because that's important. And with so much housing going in one area, I think that's probably something that we should keep top of mind. But other than that, yeah, I remember just being so excited because you really brought forth our vision and our passion. And I still feel that. I still feel like it has that potential. We just, you know, with the addition of parking, right? Because we can't do anything about that.
Not a little parking.
But thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was involved in the 2021 to 22 discussions and activities, and I still think that a lot of that, I mean, I wouldn't really change anything. The exclamation point or whatever that I would put out is the mixed opinions about type and location of housing, because I know there was quite a bit of discussion about some kind of affordable housing. And I know if you're going with like the market, whatever, you know, that's an issue. However, because this is land that the city owns, I feel like we might be able to do something, and the way that the direction is going is statewide and even nationwide, that there may be grant programs or federal programs, something that would help us to do some more along that line. And I do like the idea of a Habitat for Humanity house. That would be great. But I just don't want this to be, you know, find a developer that is going to be able to make the most money for themselves out of this area, and then we don't get all the things that we want.
Yeah, I was actually, when you mentioned the Habitat house.
Yeah, can I ask you?
I was thinking that they only did detached, like single family homes, but Mark confirmed that they do townhomes as well, so.
And first condo project in Colton.
Yeah, they're doing the diverse product they have was really surprising to me. And so, and there's some that are a little more vertical, kind of like our Carl's Farm. Last year I put siding on the side of one for a whole day. And so I think there also may be an impression that they're not high quality, and they're beautiful, and they would increase home ownership, which is a need in the state. So I don't know if there's a funding source or any problem with that, but I would love to see if we could figure that out.
Yeah,
even
I think
a
it's a really
section.
interesting idea.
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two questions, actually, to build off of what Dr. Goff is talking about and help me understand this. But, you know, you have affordable housing and you have workforce housing. And I'm just curious, how do you think about that, the definition of those two terms? Maybe they're synonymous, I don't know. Or maybe workforce housing is the new way of calling affordable housing. But I'm interested in understanding how you look at that.
Yeah.
And how this is also a component of this planning, because obviously Northglenn is known to be still one of the more affordable communities in the Denver metro area. And so how does that fit in your calculus of coming up with this design and providing, whether it's affordable housing or workforce housing, however you want to call it?
Yeah. So I guess if you look up affordable housing and workforce housing, you're going to find various definitions. The definition I typically use is 0 to 80% AMI would be affordable housing, so some level of subsidy typically, and that can come in a couple different forms. And then 80 to 120%, which I know sounds a little crazy, but given the cost of housing, people making 110%, 115% of AMI are having trouble finding appropriate housing, particularly families. And so I think there could be an opportunity for both. I don't have a preconceived notion that there has to be one or the other or both of those on the site, but I agree that I think that's a possibility. In terms of the overall housing, I mean, I do think that it's important. That's one of the things that has changed, as you pointed out. The housing market has changed. The cost of housing compared to incomes has changed. And you're right, Northglenn is still more affordable than other places, but is that affordable, I think, is a question. And so thinking about, like, is there a unique product that could be delivered here that maybe is scarce around the region or isn't even being delivered yet? I think we definitely want to think creatively around that. Mark and I both worked on Superior, well, downtown Superior, they're calling it. Back in the day, it was Superior Town Center, and then they rebranded. But we recently led a tour, and they've done some live-work units along Main Street in Superior, and they've just leased the first few of those. And it's, do you remember the rent? Was it like $2,200 or something like that? Or?
But they get really flexible with the code.
Hello. Hi.
Mark
Yeah, they took a really interesting approach in that they knew activation was the primary driver. So as the vacancies filled out throughout both the live work units as well as the residential properties around, they were flexible in the interpretation of their code in terms of how they would designate the use of the live work to get those types of uses in there. But in doing so, they were able to bring the overall rent down to a residential rate as opposed to a commercial rate, and it got the commercial use in there. And they're, again, they wanted the use in there, so their effectiveness was based on their interpretation. I also want to note, so AMI being the thresholds that Jay was noting, I just looked up really quickly. 80% AMI, so that's the top end of that range that Jay was noting. For Denver's 2024 metro rates for a family of 4 was $102,000, just as like a benchmark of thinking about cost.
Thank you, Mark.
And then just one more follow-up, if you indulge me, Madam Mayor, and that is, you know, if you're going to do mixed use, obviously you know, you were talking about putting maybe another pizzeria in. Well, how do you deconflict that, say, for example, with Perry's? And how do you? It
doesn't have to be that.
You know, I think that's the other component is we can't just think about the development of this in isolation without thinking about the potential second, third order effects with Westminster Promenade.
Absolutely.
So if there's any one thing that I'm concerned about that should be on that list is making sure we're being very thoughtful and intentional.
Yeah. Local and regional
about
competition.
The commercial implications.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It didn't have to be pizza. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had one follow-up thought. I mean, this building is fully electric, and I was trying to look at what kind of homes Habitat Humanity is building. They're building some all-electric homes, and I don't know if that's a possibility that makes it stand out. It fits in with what we're doing right now. Yeah. I had a chance to tour some all-electric homes last year, and man, I really wish that I could retrofit my home. So I'm like, this is great. Some of the features. It's just the thought. I know that's your job, but since we're already so innovative and thinking creatively and innovatively, then that's potential maybe for more fundings too in that area. Just the thought, it would be cool if there's some electric homes. How neat would that be? And then my last thing that I just wanted to say is the feedback I get from residents when there's new homes being built anywhere is don't make them ugly. So aesthetics, beauty, so whatever gets built, that just let it be beautiful, right? So that it's not like, oh, look at that eyesore when we drive by Community Center Drive, because, you know, we'll hear that. So that just keep that in mind. And I know you all do a great job because, yeah, look at what we're standing in too. So part of that visioning. Thank you. That's all I had to add.
Yeah, typically in a master plan, we wouldn't, you know, dictate the power source of a home or, you know, a building. But I think highlighting either a requirement or at least desire, at the very least, for sustainability in the design, and we could cite, you know, electrification as a piece of that. But as you know, there's a lot of different aspects. We try to not go too far in terms of being overly prescriptive in terms of any aspect of the development. Like, for instance, saying, like, we will absolutely envision an ice cream shop, you know, as part of this. But dictating that it has to be an ice cream shop in this location, right? Like, it can be tough because then you're handcuffing the development partner ultimately to that. So we want to create some flexibility, but we also want to set expectations appropriately. So we'll figure out the right way to do that in this.
I think adding to that, and I'm really glad you brought that up as far as innovation, and we need to sort of walk the talk. We can't build a building like this and then turn our eyes to future development and have it be the opposite of that. And so there may need to be some way to write that in. I don't know. But I started to think about going back to kind of the vision pieces, that destination, and jumping on what Councilmember Burns had said. She's so good at bringing a youthful perspective to council, but also a little more kind of in the moment, like how do we make it a modern space that's also timeless, which can be, a balance. But I was with Michael Stricker in Pueblo, and they have an alley that they have completely activated as an art space. That was really cool. And so something like that that's slightly edgy and cool, as opposed to here's a row of townhomes that look just like the ones right there, and here's a row of apartments that look just like those, and here, this is our one opportunity to really go crazy with this space. Not crazy, but really dig in and be innovative and creative and a little edgy with it, I think would be, this is our opportunity. And so I think really the only thing on that list that shifts for me is squeeze in a little more parking.
Yeah. Which was
and then,
on there somewhere.
And then tell us what the market will do. I think previous iterations of this conversation have been like, let's do something really cool. And then they come back and go, you got to put 5 million apartments there. That's all the market will hold. Right. And then that ends up being really disappointing. So it'd be awesome if we could come up with a balance.
Yeah. Not to get into the planning too much right now, like we definitely want to hear from you more. I do think setting expectations appropriately around the commercial piece has been challenging through the process. I share a vision that you do of a downtown and a main street, but it's tough given the location. It's not a heavily trafficked street, Community Center Drive. And so to expect people who are not coming to the rec center to come to something, like we almost have to provide those breadcrumbs. And I think that's something that we did well in the 2017 plan and I think attempted to do in the 2022 kind of revisioning. But we were obviously working with the development partner at the time too, who had their own sort of thoughts around that. So if we could build on the success of Webster Lake Promenade and somehow sort of draw people to what we're thinking about at the heart of this development, that's probably, at least headed down the right path.
Okay. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you so much, Jay, for just segueing into my thoughts around future-proofing this space as we sort of to build off Mayor Leidy's amazing thoughts and Councilmember Condo's of okay, we're seeing Prost and sort of I was there Friday night and that parking lot is full because it's too cold for my family to walk over now. And, so I think just how do we expand and like you said, those breadcrumbs, that's exactly what I was thinking of and how do we pull people then from the hotel and that walking path and giving them extra spaces to go to. I'm just going to throw out wine. You know what I mean? Just things like that. I think just to make, because I think something that I have a really strong vision, well, at least vision. I want to try and ground us back in your initial question. Sorry, this has been rambling. But a vision of more walkability. I think that is what part of the reason why I joined council is, I love to walk places. Our sidewalks are very skinny in the West, and I don't know why, but it is what it is here. But I think, how do we, if there is, a place to park, how do we like find that parking, and then people can just walk to all of the things that they want to do, building in from 120th down into over here. And especially like, I don't know, we have this great new cool building that people want to come and work in. Like, where can they go to lunch? Like, where, you know what I mean? Like, where can they go and hang and be friends after work? And like, I think like your vision and everything you just said is putting words that I didn't know that I needed. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. I see why everyone loved you. I get it. I get it now. I see the vision.
I think it was the late night Zooms that we all did together.
Yeah, it was.
So I did have a couple other questions, if I can get to those. So, so this is, I know you said we're the, the visionaries, but I do want to sort of suss out a little bit on the program elements, and housing, I think, a big one. I think if there's additional thoughts around commercial, invite those, but I feel like that's pretty clear. But on the housing, back in 2022, it was already, a little divided, a little, different in terms of people thinking I don't think anyone thought there should be no housing, but it was how much is appropriate, how much are we trying to pack in, given what the developer was trying to do at that time. And then the type of housing, rental versus ownership, different, price points. And so just curious, the thoughts around, just test, I guess to test, and I'm not trying to advocate for a position here, but just to test it on one extreme. What if there was no housing as part of the development? Is that a miss? Yeah?
I think so.
So I'm getting, yes, it's a miss, or I'm not sure.
Councilmember Burns.
Okay, so my only thing with housing is we don't have public transport over here. And I think like that is a big issue if we're gonna pack that many people here with that little parking. Sorry, I touched my microphone. I think the lack of public transit limits the amount of housing we could put here.
And you think the park and ride being across the highway that's not sufficient?
I think we're gonna have to figure that out.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, I think like I think it would be interesting for commuters to come to walk over and like come to like commercial space, and potentially like if people working down in Denver and like live there, like yes, but I feel like if the plan is, Northglenn is already very much I think it has been referred to as like a bedroom community, and I would love to see this space rectify that a little bit, where people will work and play and do everything here versus hopping on that bus and heading elsewhere, or hopping on I-25. That is my, I'm not saying no to housing completely.
Yeah.
I just worry that there are so many things here that people need to do and use and work. And how does that all kind of like the use case, like the work versus the play? How does that all flow together is my thought without more public transit.
Yeah. So one of the things, just that context setting a little bit. So the mix use, right? So I think most people think of, first of all, vertically integrated mixed use. Like you have the ice cream shop with housing above or an office above. We worked above a bakery in Boulder when we both started MIG. Great development. It really got you with the wafting smells all the time. But really what we were talking about in the master plan was, there was some envisioned in there. But the real point was that it wasn't just a civic use on this site. That you didn't have a large piece of land that was in a single use, and whether that be housing, whether it be office or civic, you do benefit. There's a civic site with a recreation center and a theater that draw people more than just that 9 to 5 period. And obviously we're all here this evening. But that was the idea, is activating the space more often and in more ways, and better utilizing and leveraging the community's resources, and in turn, creating this opportunity for a third place, creating this opportunity for a heart of the community, for the jewel. So to get the retail and get the commercial, which I think everyone agrees should be a part of that, there was some thought about housing being a component of that. Does 200 units of housing on this site like support a grocery store or 5 shops in and of themselves? No. But it does build in some some localized activation. So I don't know that housing has to be a piece of it, but it does help with sort of what the development yield is of the site, what the activation is of the site, all these different things that we're juggling. And so you have people coming and going at different times if they're utilizing housing versus if they're using an office versus they're coming to City Hall for a meeting or going to the recreation center. So that's beneficial from a traffic perspective. And then there's as I said, just the activation piece. But I think it's oversimplified to say, oh, we want some shops, so we have to have housing. It's not that simple. But the mix of uses, I think, is critical to the overall vision.
Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, I think we hear all the time from our residents that they'd like to see more affordable housing. So I know that's a tough one. But so I would hate to say we don't want any housing here, because I think we've heard from people that they want some form of housing, and we also heard from our legislative committee that there's a lot of action or discussion anyway on changing the construction defects law. And so then if that were to happen, there might be, openings for condos or something along those lines, things where people could actually, own the place they live in. So I would like to see more of that. And I think the walkability, it would be wonderful if this could be a destination place, but I do think just because of the location and the traffic on Community Center Drive already, that I don't think it's ever going to be like a huge draw. I think the theater draws the most that we're ever going to see, people coming all at the same time, or some of our events. So I'm just thinking of the people who would love to be able to walk to pay their water bill and go to the rec center and, walk to Webster Lake Promenade, and then the A.B. Raines Park is there. So it would be a great place for the people who are lucky enough to live there to have all those things. But so I would really not want to give up any kind of housing.
Great.
I want to jump on there really fast because something I've noticed lately, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is the activation of our rec center has sort of surprised us.
Yeah,
and so
surprised us too.
Yeah. So the theater is one thing, and we're getting more and more patrons, but the senior center, they have a little kitchen, but they could go and play games and then go get a cup of coffee, still walkable. But I'm noticing the activation of the rec center in the tournaments, the basketball tournaments and the games, and that's generating a lot of people, especially when there's also a show. So the rec center is doing quite a bit on its own. Councilmember Roper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My comment, I guess, around housing would be similar to Councilmember Burns. I guess I worry, of course, about high-density housing and just stacking people on top of one another, especially since we have several apartment complexes up the street. And I think this would be the tricky thing, finding the unique draw of a living space. But in order to keep it unique, you would have to keep it minimal. And I think that would be a hard trade-off for the developer, that typically they would just want to stack and grow the funds. But I think to make it unique to our space would be unique, artsy, or really, like we talked about, just different eclectic varieties of housing, not just cookie cutter, because that's not going to go with what we have.
Yeah. I find that density, the term density, is like very relative. So when you say dense or maybe too dense, what do you think is too dense? Is it about the height? Is it about the number of units in one space?
The height, like if we were to just like copy and paste what we have down the street and put that here, that would overshadow the unique aspects that we also have here, even just in the architecture. And I would hate to see that get drowned out.
Okay.
or cancel.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Walker?
Thank you, Jay. Ms. Roper hit on it. We have more than enough, even from walking distance here, more than enough apartments in Northglenn, more than enough rentals, and more than enough entry-level housing. So if this is going to be the crown jewel, the housing needs to reflect that. I'm not talking mansions, but those condos need to be unique. And I don't want to see another 3-story apartment complex like we have just up the road or off Washington. That's, like I said, it's going to be overshadowed. That's the correct word. So thank you.
Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also in the same camp as Councilmember Burns and Councilmember Roper. I actually lived in this sort of community in Pasadena. I don't know if you're familiar with Memorial Park, but it is an area where you've got a Gold Line station, so very convenient to get to downtown LA, but also the mixed-use housing around that park is all very different structures. They're not cookie cutter. So I definitely feel that is very important. I also feel very important about what Dr. Goff mentioned, which is, you know, if there is a change in the construction defect law that allows for townhomes, I think that's going to be a lot better, because if you have people that own the houses that they live in, they're going to take better care of it, and you're less likely to have a community that's going to devolve into one where you have a transient population and all of a sudden there is no community, or conversely, if it's not managed very well, then it starts to become a nexus for crime. And I'm in Ward 3, obviously. We have a lot of apartment complexes. I've done a lot of ride-alongs, and I will just tell you, oftentimes where I'm going with the police are the apartment complexes. And to me, that is a real and present concern in my mind. I don't want City Hall to be a destination for the police department.
Yeah, it was interesting, Councilwoman Goff's comment about the construction defects law, because I don't know if you meant to, but you talked about the need for affordability, and then also, you know, ideally condos could be a piece of that. And right now, the only condos that are being built in Colorado, for the most part, are very, very high end, because basically they can insure it, or they don't have to because people are very wealthy. So, yeah, I think that would be what would sort of untap that, or tap that, I guess, uncork it, would be construction defects laws changing further. But townhomes, which I don't know if you meant to say townhomes, but townhome development is happening. Yeah. And it just depends on sort of the ownership structure, but there are a lot of examples of townhomes happening across the metro area. So that's a possibility. But definitely noting the ideas about uniqueness, you know, maybe even edginess, creativity, if there is that housing. But I think it probably applies to any development on the site, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. So jumping in on this question, I 100% agree that it should be home ownership versus rentals for all the reasons that were just mentioned. And what was mentioned was exactly what I meant by it being beautiful and not cookie cutter, boxy homes like we have seen recently. So those two things, if that is still feasible in the market. I remember us having some discussions around that, and the issues where we don't know, the developers are going to look at what the ROI is going to be. So all of those things are a factor. I still do think that some type of housing would be good, but prefer 100% home ownership and the opportunity for home ownership versus just having rentals for all of the reasons stated. And beautiful. I was racking my brain trying to think of the neighborhood that was one of the first ones to have all the different colored homes and different structures, and it's so beautiful. I can't think of it, so if I think of the name of the neighborhood, I'll mention it. But something like that, that's unique and vibrant versus ugly, brown, and cookie cutter. That's all I got.
I'm not suggesting trying to replicate this at all, but it just came into my head is, I don't know if you've been to, is it called, the ones by the museum? Civic Center in Denver? I think it's just the art condos or something like that. But it's basically like adjacent to the art museum down in Denver. So when people were like, oh, why would I want to live by a city hall? Well, you're not just living by a city hall, you're living by this beautiful building, and you're living by the rec center. And those are condos. So it was one of the few condo projects that were developed around in that era. But it's a higher end product. But it is a unique product for sure.
Councilmember Roper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem, I'm wondering if you're thinking of the Prospect Townhome community. It's in Longmont off of 287.
Thank you.
It's really cool. It's really cool.
I was trying to remember. I do the MLP.
It's awesome. It's beautiful. It is.
The other one, well, I wanted to acknowledge public art. I remember the discussions, making sure that we wanted to have that integrated, telling the story, creating opportunities for art, creativity. I mean, you invite comments there too, but anything on the commercial offerings? We had some ideas around more like neighborhood serving, which would be kind of like the coffee shop, right? Like people typically don't travel 10 miles across the metro area to get coffee, unless it's to meet up with someone in particular in a certain spot. But then also this destination idea, you know, the example we threw on there was beer hall, food hall, that sort of thing. Is it all of the above? Is it leaning one way or the other?
Megan.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's like, I could envision like all of the above. Like, I mean, I grew up on the East Coast, outside of Philly, lived in Brooklyn, you know, like I love the idea of like my local grocery store that I just like picked up food on the way home, and I had so much less food waste when I could do that, you know? And I love the idea of a coffee shop, because like, and I think like grounding us back, and this is the crown jewel for Northglenn, like I don't really need people from 10 miles away coming for a coffee, but like I would like to go get one, you know, like someone who like lives in the community and service me and my needs. Especially like I bring my kids here to EB Rains, you know, and I would love to pop over because, you know, I'm also drinking caffeinated water. So like I would love something like this, and I would love a place specifically too, as more and more people have like hybrid work space, like work, like a place for me to go and sit. And like, you know, I just like envision this very like I said before, like very future focused of like, okay, like right now it's young families living in Northglenn. So what happens when our kids are all 8 and 9, 13, 14? You know, like what are the needs of the community going to be as we shift like a decade out, and like how, and like retail spaces can come and go, right? But I think it's like having those bones in place that we can like figure that out as we grow. Well, we can't grow that much more, but you know what I mean.
Councilmember Walker.
Jay, I don't think the grocery store is feasible, but I want everything on that list.
Okay.
Can we add a wine bar? Does it have to be more?
Wine?
That too, please.
Now we're picking again, but I think it's the, how do we activate the space with the commercial?
Yep. It is, I mean, I talked about the ice cream shop and not being too overly prescriptive, but it is helpful to know the types of establishments that you envision, because it informs, you know, the quantity. You know, certain types of retail needs to co-locate with other retail, needs certain level of visibility, you know, these different things, the different size spaces even. So getting that sense is really helpful. So thank you all for sharing that.
Councilmember Nowicki.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So you kind of mentioned there doesn't necessarily need to be housing in order to be commercial, but is there kind of a, I don't know, like in your opinion, is there kind of a like a blend, like a 60-40, I don't know, like 70-30, 80-20 kind of housing to commercial ideal, or something to kind of, like, it would seem to me you can't just put commercial space there. you know, it might not get activated, or, you know, it may not get used enough to warrant commercial space. So it sounds like you have to put some type of housing in that area. Is there kind of a...
I think it depends. I mean, honestly,
opinion?
it depends on the retail first. I think there are examples of destination retail that are standalone.
Like IKEA.
Yeah. An extreme
put a giant
example.
IKEA
Yeah, you could plop that anywhere and people will go to it. Doesn't matter what's around it, if there's
Right.
anything around it.
Right.
So
Trader
but for
Joe's.
the
Trader
coffee
Joe's would
shop,
fit nicely
The wine
there.
bar, the ice cream shop. I do think it's beneficial to have some residential, you know, closer by.
Mm-hmm.
A proportion of that, would you throw one out?
So then I'm going to kind of cast my lot to kind of be the other side, in that I'm probably more pro-density than a lot of folks here, because I do think that would really kind of activate the space as far as creating this area, you know, and kind of be the downtown of Northglenn, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, traditional rule of thumb for mixed use was, 4/1, right? So like 4 levels of housing, typically, like over retail. And what we're finding is that that's over retailed. In a lot of environments, like the retail's overbuilt. If you're requiring ground, this is getting off track a little bit, but a lot of design standards in different cities, zoning requirements require the ground floor to be retail in, you know, their downtown type of environment or mixed use environment. And they're realizing with all these vacancy signs and for lease signs that they should have switched that proportion like you were talking about. They should have done more housing and less retail.
Okay. So yeah, then
in a
let's
true
jack it up
mixed-use
to 5-1.
I think you're right. Yeah, you need some housing to support that retail.
Okay, thanks.
And also as part of our team, we have economic and planning systems working with us to update a market feasibility analysis, looking at a program that y'all are helping drive here, but getting into the weeds of just that. If we're looking at certain commercial provisions, what are some of those ratios we should be considering when we go across housing typologies to make sure that we're not over-prescribing in one direction or another?
Right, yeah, I'd be really curious about kind of a lot of that information.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
We will also, to Commissioner Kondo's point, Councilman, Kondo's point, the sort of the surrounding competition, I guess, making sure that, you know, if we're recommending a certain type of retail, again, not a specific retailer per se, but type of retailer or commercial use, that we're going to need to do that sort of regional scan to see what is that. Are we cannibalizing something else? Is it even feasible because something else is already successful? What's that spacing kind of requirement generally to make sure that that's successful?
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. We've heard a lot of mention of something like a coffee shop, which would be great, but I think Northglenn has several other chains. So I think something, if we're going to go in that direction, would be, you know, like a used bookstore or coffee shop or something that's more than just a coffee shop to make it unique. And in Denver, there's a lot of these little pocket retail areas scattered throughout it where you just walk down the street and there's, I don't know, just different kinds of shops that are.
The neighborhood.
Yeah, neighborhood, yeah, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what I'm imagining, that there might not be anything there that's a chain. I mean, I don't know how likely that is for us to even be able to say that, but that makes it unique. I think also gives some flexibility for the future if, you know, like if somebody else wants to do a different kind of business or something there over time. That would give them that option. And then, of course, I would love to have a yarn store. But I'll just put that in there for that. That's it for me.
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So anecdotally, in Pasadena, I lived above a wine bar, and it was 8 housing units to support that wine bar. So I just offer that as an anecdote. And then, you know, we're talking about coffee shops and stuff, and I just thought about scooters, right, over by 112th and Washington. Well, we were really happy when that opened, but it's gone now. Is there a new coffee shop? So I'm curious, and I'd like to ask Director Moding a question in regards to Carl's Farm. You know, clearly we have mixed use over there. How's that going in terms of getting retail, commercial in that mixed use setting? You know, are we finding eclectic mom and pops, or are we talking about more national chains answering the call?
The last conversations that we had with the developer, I think, leaned toward more chains, but they do seem to be more new to the market type chains. We've heard a couple of development pitches recently, so we'll have more to share on that. But I think, given again the cost of the land over there, I think we're looking at higher volume operations that can afford to can afford that space. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If I may speak to Rich's comment, I think in a couple of the comments tonight that we've heard about density and use, I think part of the challenge that we see with places like Carl's Farm is the site development costs are at a value that drives more franchise type of products, whereas here we may not have those same type of issues. That's part of that market analysis that we're going to go through to sort of see there's a market analysis and there's a market feasibility analysis. There are two separate pieces to that. But I think ultimately what it comes down to when we talk about housing versus retail mix on the site is the overall service area that we're talking about. And that's why the neighborhood serving commercial versus the destination retail, those have two different areas of impact and influence. So if we're talking neighborhood serving commercial and like what you see in those pocket neighborhoods in Denver, it's because there's a lot of density, lots and lots of people. So they're able to support those types of businesses, whereas those are also existing buildings, they're not new construction. So all those variables we're going to throw into that equation when we take this feedback back tonight. But I don't think that to the conversation that you guys are having, which is really great, is nothing is necessarily a limiter as much as it is helping us define what's potentially possible. And to the concerns that are being raised, we will definitely take those all into account with that. But there is a market reality, and that's what I think the mayor was getting at earlier, is like, what will market bring? We don't want just what, you know, if it's multifamily all day, and that's what the development community wants. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what we have to do here. So just keeping all that in mind.
Can I ask a follow-up? Just sure. For the purposes of the audience, can you just define the difference between market analysis and market feasibility analysis?
Sure. So a market analysis is what the demand is out in the market right now. So like for the last decade, you could pretty much throw a multifamily project anywhere and it's going to pay for itself. Market feasibility has to do with, is it technically possible on the site? So it's how we do what we call the pro forma, where we sit down and we say, okay, here's the land costs, here's how much it's going to take to bring infrastructure to the site. Is there infrastructure to the site? And then it also is going to look at, you know, how all of those components come together to actually make something real. And I think that's one of the things that we've been successful as a community and as an organization, is that we don't look at just the aspirational. We kind of take that extra step to look at that market feasibility part.
So would you say that that's really a return on investment sort of analysis?
That's another way of saying it, yeah.
And generally, market rate developers, what are they looking for in terms of an ROI?
Depends on the use. So if it's residential, it can vary from 2% to 10%. For retail, it depends on how their business model is set up, whether they're the owner property manager, or if they're just selling off pad sites. So there's different models for rates of return for commercial. A lot of times it's usually double digit, where residential is usually, you know, from the 2 to 12% is typically where they swim in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what else do you want to know?
So I think this is my last question, actually. I meant to pepper a couple in here, but
Okay.
But specifically the north half of the site. So thinking about north of Festival Lawn, north of the Memorial. Any specific expectations for that north half of the site?
Councilmember Burns?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, to me, that makes the most sense where housing belongs. I think, like, from, like, a use standpoint, that's where housing belongs. Like, I don't know, I keep looking at this map that y'all put together in 22. And was the old City Hall building that big? I just don't think that we could fit that many houses and that much parking in that space.
It's to scale.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I love that for us. But I feel like I just feel like housing belongs. Like, I love this like big block of housing that y'all have, and that makes a lot of sense to me versus like the big block in the middle. I think like that's like, because that's north, right? This is the part we're talking about, like over by the hotel.
Right in this.
Yeah. I think, to me, that, like, makes the most sense from, like, a flow, and, like, I don't know what it's called in city planning, but, like, from website use, it's, like, the user design flow, like, the UX flow, right? Like, well, like, as an experience, how would I flow through this space? And to me, that makes the most sense versus, like, someone who lives in the middle, and it's like, okay, like, I'm picking my kid up from the rec center at 10 p.m., or there's, like, high school kids, like, causing a ruckus. Like, I would be kind of crabby about that. But I'm old at heart, you know what I mean? So, like, I think, like, to me, that makes the most sense for the north space, like, and, like, I think just, like, dense housing would make the most sense with, like, that, then, like, the gradual transition into, like, commercial and public use. That's just my 2 cents, though.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Other thoughts about the north half of the site?
I don't see any other hands. Councilmember Nowicki?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just do want to comment that park area up there to the very top right. I really like that too. That retention pond. There. Yeah, the detention pond. Right. Well, the way you guys designed it, if it came out like that, that would be awesome. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
We did try to work it into the overall trail network.
Right. Yeah. Looks good.
So, Jay, is the question because that's what we have, I mean, like, it's designed here. Did you think that we maybe had a change of heart from this image to something different?
I think it's the area that has, it's still despite the imagery, it's the area without any, we haven't really put a, shovel in the ground, so to speak, right? So it has the most potential in terms of what options, I guess, are available versus the southern half of the site.
So
not that the ship has sailed, so to speak. But.
Yeah. So one of the thoughts I had, I know in previous discussion, we sort of limited any commercial to Festival Lawn, and we didn't really take a side street. And I don't know if this is even possible, but is there any way to do like a one-way on this side and a one-way on this side? That is the most narrow street ever right now. And so I don't know if you could put a street on either side. It's just a question.
I heard Brooks smirk because that's what we had included in the master plan in 2017, actually.
That's why I thought that. So
And then close those two one-way couplets for larger festival events.
right. Can we go back to that? Can we dial that back? I mean, that was actually my feedback from the very beginning. I was pretty frustrated when the plan came out with our very, very narrow street and the one-sided festival street, whatever it's called. So I don't know. I mean, if there is like a cross street so that there's sort of an intersection of commercial, maybe it makes it a little more downtown. It doesn't. We know we're not going to be able to build a little downtown with nothing but commercial, but to have more than just one street, I don't know if that's possible, but I do love the dreaming phase. I never love the here's what the market will do for you phase, but the dreaming phase is fun.
It is.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. So I don't have any particular like demands or, thoughts that it has to be, except that originally one section of that was supposed to be, I don't know, some kind of rent controlled or low cost housing way back when, which I don't know, I guess we're giving that up. So it was just like it was apartments on the north end and then townhomes and that kind of thing on the south end. So I think, I don't know why they couldn't be mixed up a little bit differently. So I just don't have any particular demands or expectations that it has to be that way.
Okay.
Councilmember Kondo?
Madam Mayor, I'm just trying to understand what you're talking about in terms of another street. Are you suggesting having another street run along the north side of Festival Lawn?
Yes.
So parallel with Memorial Parkway?
Yes.
And that would be one way, and then Memorial Parkway would be just one way eastbound?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes. So the idea is that there was going to be a one-way in on the north side of the Memorial and then a one-way out on the south side of the Memorial. And it was going to frame Festival Lawn.
Gotcha. I think on that, I'm in agreement with you, Madam Mayor. I think that, when Councilmember Burns talks about density of people and the number of vehicles and whatnot, maybe perhaps when this was developed, we were thinking, yeah, this is a transit-oriented community, but the truth of the matter is, I don't think a lot of people are going to use the RTD park and ride going to downtown. It's so inconvenient. There's so few number of buses that are making that run. And my concern is that people will move in here and they'll say, well, gee, I only have 1.5 parking spots. I'll just park my other car in the public parking space that may be reserved for the rec center. And then we're gonna be back at this whole problem of insufficient parking or not enough parking for the seniors.
Yeah, I think one thing because we did do some work, and Mark may want to speak to it, he kind of led it, but looking at the parking situation that exists today, and what it showed is that north part of the site, around the old rec center, people don't really want to use that parking. It's great for the events and staging, as I think someone mentioned. So it's for the rec center specifically, right? Like they don't want to park too far away and walk. So I do think it creates some possibilities for a different complementary use. And then maybe it does create that opportunity, I think, as a couple people mentioned, where you park once and then you're sort of visiting a variety of things on the site. That was it? Okay.
So I just wanted to throw a couple quick closing comments up. One thing that Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hermosa brought up was energy codes. And on a separate track right now, we are working on the 2024 updating, adopting those. We were hoping to bring that to City Council here this year. There's been a delay on the 2024 energy codes. And so we're working with the code forward with the regional effort to bring forward updated codes that will basically effectively move toward net zero and all electric options as we go forward. So this project would be subject to that. I just wanted to mention that. Interesting. So that it doesn't necessarily need to be part of the DNA of this. And I think Rich brought up in his last comment there, so it's really significant as a change from the 2017 to now, is the impact that COVID has had on transportation and how transportation has changed dramatically. And I think that was definitely a factor too as we track this project.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Director Svoboda, for that. And also, that was part of the issue we had with the TOC bill, in terms of density and transportation. So great to keep an eye on that. But I was just going to go back to something that Councilmember Kondo mentioned about parking, because I know when we had the parking discussion, we talked about making sure that there were specific parking spots potentially reserved for seniors or more of them, or like some creative use of, you know, during this time, it's okay to use it for rec center parking versus, you know, open to residents, potential future residents. And there's different ways, from my understanding, that you all were gonna look at the different options as to what that could be, like, you know, permit parking or timed parking from this time to this time, seniors only from this time to this time, that sort of thing. So my understanding is that there's definitely still a lot of work to be done as to what that looks like. Lighting systems that show there's parking available, I don't know.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So at the end of that technical exercise, we've gotten to kind of a palette of the different strategies we could look into, and then based on y'all's direction, moving into this phase, we'll be making those into the different development scenarios. If we take the next strategy, what does that mean for the overall dedication of parking in addition to not just proximity, which is the driving force, that we're the nimble strategies that help us create unique solutions that still allow for development but satisfy the parking needs. Proximity. I think that's 100% part of the next. Probably getting into December's meeting when starting to talk about how some of those might nest into the concepts.
Right, thank you. That was my understanding. I just don't want residents to hear this and go, oh no, they're going to do away with our parking again, because I know that it's definitely very, very important. So just want to make sure our residents that are hearing this understand that, yes, it's still at the top of our minds.
I know.
Thank you.
Just lean on it, no more sound. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So one other thought is, of course, the retention pond area, and I'm just curious, can that also be used for parking?
The detention pond? No.
Yeah. Because it looks really flat. It almost looks like a golf course with a green on there, and I'm like,
it in that rendering, but in fact, it is not flat.
Okay, so it's still going to be this big divot that's going to collect water, right?
So there's two answers to that. First off, part of the design for that was intentional to make the project as shovel-ready as possible by designing for 90% of impervious for the entire site. And so when we put that pond in originally, it was to make the redevelopment more accessible for developers, because we wanted to front load that. There's always an engineering solution to where you can cover that detention pond, and see, I touched it that time, but I didn't touch the pond. I just want to be clear. So, but you could do something, but there's a dollar amount to that to basically make it a subterranean drainage system. So it's possible. The question is, do the numbers pencil for it?
Gotcha. Okay. It does look like a nice putting green.
I think we've come to the end of our feedback.
Great. Well, thank you for your time, especially since I had the last two items on the agenda. But just to review the next steps again really quickly, we want to take all the feedback that we heard from you all tonight. We're going to come back with sort of development approaches, development scenarios in early December. Based on the feedback you give us on those, we'll then take that through with economic and planning systems that Mark mentioned, one of our typical partners. They worked on the 2017 master plan with us. And looking at that market, sort of the market need, the pro forma analysis, the market feasibility, as Brooke mentioned, but also looking at infrastructure being a really key piece of this and sort of key cost component. And then, as you can see, the work in 2025, but looking to wrap something up, middle of next year.
Can you go back? Who are you going to take that to work with? Your partner?
Infrastructure, or actually it's the market and market feasibility analysis, and economic and planning systems, EPS.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you so much.
Love it. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, great to see you all.
All right. We are alone at this time of night, so I'm going to move into, I will entertain a motion that the city hold executive session pursuant to section 4.5A of the City of Northglenn Home Rule Charter for personnel matters regarding council appointee evaluations for the city manager.
So moved. Second.
All right. Please open the vote. Please vote.
I'll close that vote, and the motion to meet in executive session passes unanimously.
Great. While we don't have as much to break down, we will adjourn to executive session and then take a 5-minute break.